If you're a potential entrepreneur, a startup, or an SME, now here's a new platform that simplifies your local business ecosystem. Index.maltaemployers.com helps you simplify and access essential information for free. Be entertained with a unique directory of licensing authorities, government and non-government entities, business-related NGOs and associations, together with a comprehensive list of available schemes and assistance. A unique think tank and a checklist process that offers a step-by-step guide to start your own business. Your first steps in life are a mirror for a sound future. Index.maltaemployers.com.
Hey, wake up. Your meeting's been moved an hour earlier. Don't worry. We've got you covered. In fact, we've got you covered in the desperate times, in the challenging times, in the good times, and when you just want to wind down. We're here, we're there, we're everywhere whenever you need us the most, and even when you don't. eCabs, together for the journey.
Issa biex tiftaħ negozju ġdid jew tiżviluppa l quddiem in-negozju tiegħek m'għandekx għalfejn tiġri minn post għal ieħor u taħli l-ħin prezzjuż tiegħek. L-uffiċini l-ġodda One Stop Shop ta' Business First fl-imrieħel jassistuk b'dak kollu li għandek bżonn. Is-servizzi kollha taħt saqaf wieħed. ċempel 144 għall-assistenza jew sabiex tagħmel appuntament.
Good morning and welcome to this year's SMEs National Forum with the theme Green Growth, SMEs and Green Growth, the Journey Ahead. Well, for decades, delivering economic growth and sustainable development were seen as conflicting objectives that needed to be balanced for the benefit of humanity. As citizens became increasingly aware of the irreversible damage the planet is facing, there is now a wider acceptance that we do not need to sacrifice our future for progress. Businesses acting sustainably and ensuring greener processes in producing or delivering their service will now be able to take advantage of changing consumer demand. The direction is being strongly backed by the European Green Deal, which is set to bring about a wave of new policy and an unprecedented financial commitment. This will bring extensive funding and support, but at the same time, it is going to also require significant changes from businesses in a wide array of sectors to significantly transform the way they operate. Maltese authorities have taken on board these opportunities and committed to spend more than half of the budget allocated by the EU through the Recovery and Resilience Facility on green projects. As Malta seeks to push forward its green credentials on the context of post-pandemic regeneration, SMEs will be facing growing challenges, but also opportunities as they map their way forward. In this context, this year's SMEs National Forum, organized by the SME Help Desk within the Malta Employers Association, in collaboration with the Ministry for the Economy and Industry and a number of stakeholders, will focus on the journey ahead for SMEs in the context of green growth. A number of high-profile speakers today from the public and private sectors will be with us today to share their experience and vision on this theme. The themes being discussed include latest developments in tech and the green economy, the need for greener planning, and challenges in moving forward towards a greener mobility. To start off with, we would like to share with you a video produced by the EU Commission, the European Green Deal. Let's watch together. I cannot kick off this hybrid event without thanking the overwhelming number of representatives from governmental and non-governmental bodies who have accepted to be part of the panelists, the keynote speakers we have today. I would also like to thank the back-of-house service providers who will be responsible for the technical support here in the studio at the Dolmen Hotel. And through them, we are able to stream live both on Zoom and online platform and also on Facebook Live. So thank you once again. I would also like to reach out to you all today who have registered, and thank you very much for being with us for this morning's conference. We shall begin with our first keynote speaker through a pre-recorded message. Before, actually, I would also like to thank a few other sponsors who have helped support this event. These are the Malta Employers Association, of course, who, in collaboration with the Ministry for the Economy and Industry, who have particularly organized this event. I would also like to thank sponsors of this event who are Foundation for Transport, the Malta Development Bank, and Malta Enterprise. And also, eventually, you can see throughout the day that this half-day conference is also supported by the Ministry for the Environment, Climate Change and Planning, the Ministry for Energy, Enterprise and Sustainable Development, and the Ministry for Transport, Infrastructure and Capital Project. Our first keynote speaker is a pre-recorded message from the MEA President, Ms. Joanne Bondin. Ms. Joanne Bondin has been appointed as the President of the Malta Employers Association. She has served on the Council of the MEA for a number of years and has 15 years of experience in providing consultancy services to a variety of companies. She is also a member of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, Institute of Recruitment Professionals, and the British Psychological Society. Let us hear from Ms. Bondin.
I welcome you to this conference organized by the Malta Employers Association in collaboration with the Ministry for the Economy and Industry as part of the SME Week Malta program of events. In 2014, President Obama stated that we are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. This statement left an impact on me, a sense of responsibility that needs to be actioned. If we do not do something about it, then who will? Just as every individual action has landed us in the current situation, then every action, every movement, every thought needs to be channeled to do something about it. And this conference aims to do just that, to bring together different stakeholders, to be able to generate discussion about what we are going to do about being more sustainable. Be more green, think green and act green. This is not a short-term action plan, and we need to be prepared to reap the benefits of what we are going to do in the longer term. We will be devising a plan for the future, for our children, for humanity to live in harmony with nature and not impose or work against it. Over the coming years, the European Commission will be revising some of its major policies to ensure that they respect sustainability fundamentals. The European Green Deal is about protecting jobs and, more importantly, the planet. Without a planet, there will be no jobs, no humans. For decades, we thought that these two objectives were antagonists. Today, we acknowledge that we do not need to sacrifice our planet for progress. We need to rethink the way we work and also the impact we, as humans who dominate Earth, have. We also need to keep in mind that our ways of working will also generate new jobs and the need for new skills. We have to be flexible enough to be able to change and adapt accordingly. For example, if we are going to shift to electric cars, then we need to make sure that our mechanics have new skills, that they actually have trained individuals, incentives that encourage people to change mentality, and more importantly, have the infrastructure that will allow us to do so. It will require a change in mentality, by each and every one of us. Not only thinking about short-term convenience and gratification, but also our contribution to saving the planet. This is all about being human and thinking long-term. It is an opportunity for Malta to seek to move up the value chain. We have the opportunity to think afresh on a number of economic sectors. As I was nursing my daughter yesterday evening, I was thinking about what I was going to say in the opening speech for the conference, and I thought, why is this worthwhile? We have been given this world to live in and use the resources it has wisely. I think that this is the most important thing that we need to keep in mind. There is a balance that we need to maintain. What world do we wish to have in the future, and how do we wish the future generations to live? If we think about it, we have three main elements which make change possible today: awareness, knowledge, and technology. We should also ensure that all social partners are involved and participate, as this is a long-term project that needs to have everyone on board, including anyone in decision-making positions, who might be tempted to revise policies at a national level in the future. The pandemic has shown us that we can work differently, and we have adapted successfully. So this new way of working needs to be seen not as a new burden, but as a means of creating sustainable solutions which will deliver new opportunities for growth. We also need to see how our country needs to adapt to make it a place worth living in for generations to come. It is encouraging to note the strong attendance for this conference, together with the diversity of speakers, because this is, in itself, an indicator that this is an issue that resonates with concerns of all Maltese society. We have been presented with a challenge and targets, and every little step towards achieving these will make our world, our country, our home, a better place to live in. And it is also our well-being and protecting our national and international environment. I am certain that you will find the presentations informative and the discussion stimulating, so I invite you to fully participate and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Ms. Bondin. It is important to note, I think, that the challenges to a more greener economy must not only be the onus of the government, but it requires the participation of all local entrepreneurs. And in fact, we have two local entrepreneurs who are setting some best practices in this video clip to share with you, which has been prepared for us by Gadgets. It's titled, "Technology Facilitates Our Greener Journey Ahead." Let us watch together.
Europe has recorded its highest ever temperature.
Li jkun ikun drama xi ħaġa għandek sħana hemmhekk jibdejlek nar.
We are facing a global climate emergency.
Global warming, excessive heat, bad air quality, plastic in our seas, these are all very real. Sustainable development is a way of protecting our environment, and thanks to the advances in technology, we can be on the way to lead a more sustainable life. We at Gadgets are all about empowering our audiences and being more social and environmentally responsible. The word sustainable is a key buzzword which was created in the 80s, which means being able to meet the needs of today's people without having to affect the future generation and stopping them from reaching their needs. Technologies like renewable energy, solar power, LED lighting, carbon capture are all ways of helping us reach our sustainable development goals. Maltese and Gotham business are putting innovation as their top priority.
British Commercial has invested heavily in building its new premises. We have designed our premises to have high ceilings, as this will complement better living environment, natural lighting with excessive shafts and skylights and atriums. We are installing car charging stations in our car parking spaces, and also embarking on a plan to provide free car charging stations outside our building for people visiting our premises, so as to help with the infrastructure where people can, yes, charge their cars, as we understand there is a shortage of charging places around Malta. Last and not least, all our packaging waste is being recycled and repacked as to go back to its waste stream in accordance to the directives and regulations and recycling methods available. As a company, we have a 10-year plan for sustainability. We are planning to implement a roof garden for the general use of the building, where we will be having a leisure area, a good area for our employees and our customers as need be. We as a company are embarking on a very ambitious program to make sure that all our products, where practically possible, of course, have a 10-year lifespan. This means that we as a company must invest heavily and more in spare parts, in after sales, in technical support to see that the products do live throughout the 10-year product lifetime promise.
At Dr. Juice, we encourage reusable cups. So our customers come in, they take their cups refilled, and they get a €1 credit in order for them to be encouraged to come and reuse our Dr. Juice cup. We'll also look at innovations to increasing the amount of plant-based food that we offer and innovating ways to give new textures, new flavors to a whole range of people. A huge challenge we're facing at Dr. Juice was the birth of delivery. The challenge for us is the additional packaging that we have to run into. So we're trying to match this by using our own native app, which is designed to allow customers to pre-order and collect, no waiting, with extra discounts to incentivize them to come into the store to try to avoid delivery. It's important for us to be part of an eco-friendly business because at Dr. Juice, we want to be part of the solution. But alone, we can only go so far, and we need help from external resources and governments to really take our solutions to the next level.
A socio-economic growth is leading us towards a more forward-looking future where we are more sustainable.
Thank you, Gadgets. Well done. In fact, we will be sharing more best practices throughout this morning, so stay with us. I would now like to apologize for Honourable Silvio Schembri, the Minister for the Economy and Industry, for not being able to be present with us due to other governmental commitments he had this morning. However, he did record a message and we would like to now share it with you.
Good morning, and excuse me for not being able to be physically present due to other ministerial commitments. Back to today's topic. I believe that SMEs and industry are at the core of our economic vision. A vision that is underpinned by a formula based on the strong collaboration between businesses and government. This, we believe, remains the only way forward towards legitimately sustainable future. The pandemic has propelled us into the future, both from a digitization as well as an environmental conscious perspective. Both issues need to be progressed in tandem. This is a crucial moment for businesses to look within and start adapting and adopting to new methods. The time is ripe to strategize and build a vision for the coming years based on these foundations. It is also time to be bold at this very specific moment in history, which positions businesses at a very delicate juncture. It is a do-or-die moment, where business can either choose the status quo, which in this fast-moving scenario could perhaps sound the death knell, or take the next step leap forward and reinvent themselves where and when necessary. Budget 2022 was created in this spirit, to incentivize the necessary changes through various grants which shall serve as the appropriate impetus for a more proactive and visionary mindset to take root within our business community. But not only. Budget 2022 also aims to guide as well as provide the relevant tools through several measures to ensure the smooth digital transition for our businesses. Along with digitization, we must also remember that the circular economy and green growth go hand in hand. With great pleasure, I note that reconstituted stone, a project reached by the University of Malta and supported by Indus, takes full advantage of construction and demolition waste as a secondary raw material to create a new stone, which can then be utilized in the construction and building as an alternative to limestone bricks and concrete. It is no secret that Malta has a monumental problem with the disposal of construction waste, topped also with the recent dumping charges, which has placed a bigger burden on developers, both big and small. After years of research, we have finally arrived to where we are today: the construction and completion of the first ever room made out of recycled limestone building waste. This was placed near the Ali Crafts village. The recycled limestone blocks are made from crushed recycled quarry waste, and it is a load-bearing product similar to that traditional Franca stone. This innovative product will possibly provide a solution to the challenge faced by the construction industry, as global Jarina limestone is becoming an increasingly limited resource. This without considering the fact that the construction industry generates the island's largest volume of waste. The purpose of this prototype room is to monitor how the recycling stone performs in actual real-world conditions. It is ultimately a work in progress, but one which we hope will deliver our projected results. It is said that big challenges start with small steps. And it is to this end that we regard the well-being of our planet, we must be ultra-vigilant. In the coming months, world leaders must take bold decisions that shall shape humankind for the coming century. Therefore, without underestimating the challenges involved, we must all bear in mind that this is critical and we must make the right choices now. Choices which will have repercussions on generations to come. Addressing climate and environmental challenges clearly requires natural scientific knowledge as well as engineering expertise concerning the various technical solutions that can be adopted to mitigate the negative impacts of the environment. However, pursuing sustainable technological change is also a societal, organizational, political, and economic endeavor which involves several non-technical challenges. It is therefore hugely satisfying when meeting big companies which are well known within the manufacturing industry to note that their efforts to embark on this transition, the enhancement of research within this sector, and the discovery of automated operations that could be beneficial is a true eye-opener and can be a clear pointer to that very use of technology and greener growth which are at par. Improving resource efficiency as a contribution to sustainable development and the green economy is one of the most important challenges society is facing today. A challenge which technology can squarely tackle, primarily because it provides an important perspective which deals with scarce and diminishing resources. However, new opportunities invariably require new skills. While addressing the skills deficit remains a constant challenge, and given the rapidly evolving work environment and uphill struggle, we shall as a government continue to strive to provide the necessary tools and a myriad of educational prospects as well as attractive initiatives for our workforce, which will address both the challenges of today and even more of those tomorrow. Nevertheless, let me conclude with a heartfelt appeal. Over the past months, as I am sure several of those present can attest, we have journeyed together through intense, uncharted territory. But we have prevailed. It is time to look to the future with a fresh sense of enthusiasm. It is now time to reinvigorate, think outside the box, and take a giant leap forward. Ultimately, it is only by truly overhauling our decades-long mindset and challenging the status quo that we can truly transition into a more successful and more prosperous future, which benefits our businesses, our employees, and most importantly, our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister Silvio Xkembri. Indeed, this does require the commitment of all, from small too big in terms of consumers, in terms of entrepreneurs, in terms of governmental bodies. Our education plays an important key as well, but as Honourable Minister mentioned, it is actually a decision that we all have to take on a daily basis. What decision am I going to take today? So with that empowering message, we'll move on. Firstly, I would like to share with our online participants as well the contributors that contributed to today's event. So please allow us a moment to share our thanks. This SME National Forum, part of the SME Week Malta 2021 program of events, is being brought to you by the Malta Employers Association in collaboration with the Ministry for the Economy and Industry. Sponsored by the Foundation for Transport, the Malta Development Bank, and Malta Enterprise. Supported by the Ministry for the Environment, Climate Change and Planning, the Ministry for Energy, Enterprise and Sustainable Development, and the Ministry for Transport, Infrastructure and Capital Projects. With the participation of eSkills Malta Foundation, Family Business Office, Business First, MCAST, EU Malta Office, Partit Nazzjonalista, the Malta Chamber of SMEs, Malta Maritime Forum, Intelligent Planning Forum University of Malta, Sustainable Built Environment Malta, IISBE Malta Chapter University of Malta, Weave Consulting, Greenskip Limited, eCabs, SO Limited, Eurobridge, AIS Technology Limited, Malta Road Safety Council, Tech.mt. Special thanks also go to Dolmen Hotel Aura, C Consulta and Bold Agency, The Media TV, Gadgets Limited, and all other subcontractors involved. As we mentioned earlier, we shall be sharing with you some best practices for greener solutions by local entrepreneurs. And the next video clip is by engineer Daryl Schembri from AIS Technology.
I am Daryl Schembri, General Manager at AIS Technology. AIS Technology is an engineering firm. We deliver building automation, security, and HR systems. AIS Technology forms part of AIS group of companies. In 2019, we benefited from a Malta Enterprise scheme, and we grew our business into a different sector. Nowadays, AIS Group also comprises companies offering environmental consultancy and software development services. AIS Group is based in 2 locations, in Zaytun and in Vgura. We employ over 60 people, and the investment that we did allowed us to grow into a new sector, expanding our business in technology and IoT. At AIS Group, we have a passion for technology and environment. With our skill set, we targeted the waste management sector to see how technology can improve their operations and reduce costs. We came up with a waste management solution which is based on Internet of Things, IoT technology. This technology allows us to install sensors inside each waste bin that is deployed as part of the system. The waste management system uses fill level sensors to monitor the real-time fill levels of each waste bin. The data is sent from these sensors to a central software platform, allowing a waste operator to view and to monitor the status of their bins in real time. We then used artificial intelligence techniques to be able to estimate the precise moment when a bin is full. The software application allows us to be able to see the real-time status of each waste bin. The application also uses artificial intelligence techniques to estimate the precise moment when a bin is full. This allows a waste collection scheme to be built on actual data and not guesswork. With this system, waste operators benefit from reduced costs and increased efficiencies. Furthermore, the solution is positive towards the environment as it results from reduced collection trips, lower traffic congestion and reduce CO2 emissions. From the benefits that we have seen from this solution when deployed locally, we have also gained enough confidence in order to look to push the system beyond our shores and in export markets. Furthermore, we continue to be passionate about how we can use technology to help the environment around us. As a result, at AIS Technology, we will continue to invest in our workforce and our skill set to come up with new solutions which combine technology to help the world around us.
Thank you, Engineer Shkembri. Let us now start with our first topic for the panel discussion and, of course, for the keynote speak, the progress in technology and the green economy. To elaborate on this topic, I wish to invite Isaac Sammout, our first keynote speaker. Isaac Sammout is a manager at Tech.mt. He currently heads the business development unit at Tech.mt and is engaged in establishing relationships with industry to nurture an environment of growth and collaboration. In your hands, Isaac. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and good morning to all. It's a true pleasure to be here today to speak about two key subjects which are ultimately at the core of Tech.mt's mission and at Malta's economy at whole. The digital and green economy are undisputedly the top two subjects on the political agenda at both national and European level. Malta's green and digital efforts have increased in recent years, with the 2022 budget explicitly focusing on a green recovery and the government reaffirming its commitment to renewing Malta's digital strategy. Established on four key pillars of promotion, innovation, talent, and assistance, Tech.mt works closely with local businesses within multiple sectors of Malta's economy to expose their innovative technologies and showcase their work. Undoubtedly, the tech sector has been mandated to represent an essential role in the green economy. Existing and emerging technologies and innovations are being leveraged today to monitor data and improve efficiency in multiple sectors of the Maltese economy. Unfortunately, we do not speak enough about the high level of innovation and talent among the local tech sector. From waste monitoring solutions using next-generation IoT technology, smart agriculture systems, to also power monitoring within the gas sector, and also sustainability projects within the hospitality sector, Maltese businesses are already exploiting the use of technology within various aspects of the economy. One can ultimately pose the question as to what these solutions all have in common. Firstly, and perhaps most proudly, they are developed and integrated by Maltese SMEs. Secondly, they are all contributing to green growth, the key theme of today's conference. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and the Internet of Things have been maturing over the past few years and seem poised for continued growth in Malta. This growth is expected to be driven by multiple sectors such as transportation, logistics, telecommunications, and also manufacturing. The benefits of growth within such sectors are consequently leaving a positive impact on our businesses and our environment by reducing operational costs, minimizing traffic congestion, and ensuring lower carbon emissions. Through industry and technology-specific research and studies over the past 12 months, Tech.mt has engaged and consulted with multiple businesses, creating innovative solutions within the tech sphere. In fact, I am proud to say that we are currently finalizing a national report regarding the adoption of IoT among Maltese businesses, ultimately paving the way for businesses to redefine the way they manufacture or design products, optimize processes, and also enable enhanced sales. Since its inception in 2019, Tech.mt has pledged its expertise, its resources, and also commitment to collaborating with different stakeholders, from ministries and educational institutions to the business community at whole. ranging from large enterprises to SMEs and also startups. Tech.mt continues to commit itself to help the environment and to tackle the issue of climate change through the use of digital technologies. During 2021, Tech.mt has supported local accelerator programs to boost innovation in relation to climate change solutions by supporting and also funding local startups. We have also signed collaborative agreements with important stakeholders such as the Ministry for Environment, Climate Change and Planning to recognize and celebrate the actions and achievements taken by local businesses, public and private organizations, groups, and individuals in the fight against climate change across the Maltese Islands. Tech.mt will continue leveraging the opportunity to involve itself in various areas where tech can be beneficial to the community, environment, and society at large. We will continue to encourage tech companies and research and development companies to increase their efforts to develop new green technologies that can contribute to emission reductions, such as clean energy, clean transportation, develop new techniques to improve resource and energy efficiency, and improve products and performance design to reduce carbon footprint. Considering the importance of developments in the various areas of technology and innovation within the Maltese tech ecosystem, there is a dire need, but also a mutual desire for enhanced cooperation amongst various stakeholders. At Tech.mt, we recognize that the key aspect to stay ahead of the game lies in the agility of implementing new, innovative, and greener technologies. To this end, we encourage tech companies to reach out to Tech.mt and explore different avenues of growth together. I conclude by pledging Tech.mt's commitment to continue working towards boosting Maltese SMEs and startups in their development and mission towards ensuring a greener and more digital future. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you very much. So we now start with our panel discussion, but before that I would like to invite all online participants to input any questions in the Zoom chat box. We will take the Q&A right after our discussion. So to start off, I would like to invite Mr. Karm Kakia, Chief Administrator, eSkills Malta Foundation, to join me here on stage. Dr. Joseph Gerada, Regulator at Family Business Office. Mr. Kevin J. Borch, CEO of Malta Maritime Forum and MEA Consultant. Ms. Dana Farrugia, CEO at Tech.mt. And entrepreneur engineer Daryl Shkembri from AIS Technology. Thank you very much. Hope you are all well this morning. I have a few questions each, and then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A this morning. So let us start with Mr. Karm Kakia. How does digital skills and education affect the sustainable development and the green economy?
Yes, first of all, good morning, and thank you for inviting me. Well, education and digital skills are at the center of everything that happens actually when it comes to technology. So when it comes to probably education is the, let's say, one of the main users of energy. You know, around about billions of students at some time they go to school, and primary level and secondary, okay? So the way we see the climate change as regards to digital skills, first of all, we see it from the educational side, forget the digital. So we need to start from the younger generation. The children of today are the business leaders of tomorrow, as they say. So we need to start early. Education is passing through a lot of transformation already because of the digital nature. And therefore, this, let's say, subject, which is getting a lot of focus, needs to be introduced possibly at home first, but then as well in schools, and keeping going up to the tertiary level. It doesn't stop there, though, because the digital nature of things these days are predominant in whatever we do. So kids and students need to start being taught how to use technology in a way to reduce the carbon footprint. This comes from all IoTs, from all, we heard Isaac talking about the IoTs. The problem sometimes is that the education and skills are the last things that are mentioned in every speech. While this should start being the focus of things. Now, obviously, when it goes even higher, universities and curriculums need to become greener. So before we used to say curriculums should be transformed to become digital by design, which means digital skills are taught as part of the curriculum. Now also green by design. Okay, so we need to start thinking about having green teachers, where they have a focus on introducing the green issues in education. Curriculums at tertiary level, technical curriculums. Obviously, technology is at the fulcrum of everything, and it uses energy. There are a lot of developments going on, sometimes controversial as well. If we talk about call centers, and call centers, especially at the pandemic, were very important. Okay. However, we do know that data centers, they use a lot of energy. Okay. So there is new technology coming up, like the edge computing, where the processing is done further away from the center, but is done at the source. Okay. But these need to be taught to technologists, to practitioners, ICT practitioners, and obviously these are all part of the skills.
I would go on to say that it's not only the children that need to learn this,
yes,
but also adults, and that's the importance of training even on the jobs. But let's move on to Dr. Gerada so that we can all hear your views on the topic. Dr. Gerada, how prepared are family businesses basically to adopt a greener economy and use technology?
Well, back in 2019, in the most recent, let's say, survey of one of the big four, 54% of family businesses said that they were scared of new technologies, of changes, basically. So I would say that since then, since 2019, we had the pandemic, I think that would have changed by now, even though we don't have statistical information on that. I think it would have changed. And it would have changed because we have seen in practice family businesses actually adopting certain technologies, moving on towards digitalization. When we talk about new things, new technologies, very often people are scared, okay? Especially when you have family businesses where the first generation or the second generation is still managing that business. When we start adopting those new technologies and people start seeing from the example of others how these can actually be implemented, things start changing, things start moving along. And as we have seen, for example, during the past year, whereas we had a lot of family businesses which were scared of going into e-commerce, for example, a lot of them realized that if they don't make that step towards e-commerce, towards expanding their market, they would have unfortunately died a natural death. Yeah. Once they started implementing these measures, then they realized the potential that their business can have. However, when you spoke about going online, moving towards e-commerce, a lot of them would have told you before having felt the need to do so that They were satisfied with the customers that they had. They were satisfied with the income they were receiving. So they did not feel the need to do so. Now, when we speak about green economy, people will start realizing that it's not just about moving on towards something which is perhaps a bit trendier, a bit more fashionable. It's also about sustainability. So unless we want to live in an environment where it's unlivable for our children, we need to make that change. However, we need to start giving examples, I believe, because we're talking about the green economy, green technologies, and for them to feel how they can implement these changes within their business, I think it's still a bit blurred, okay? So we need to start leading by example, perhaps, and showing how in very small everyday matters, we can start implementing change. Even if we save paper, okay, and we go digital, that's already a move.
Yes.
However, we need to speak more about such examples.
In fact, I think, like you're mentioning, the more we share videos out there, like we did, of the best practices, and influence people and businesses how we can with simple examples. I mean, we need much more of that in order for people to do the move, to make the move then. Thank you very much. Let's move on to Mr. Borg. Obviously, as Malta Maritime Forum, I need to ask you, how do you see technology enhancing the progress towards carbon neutrality in the maritime sector?
Okay, thank you. So, shipping is already the most energy efficient mode of transport, shared by its critical mass, only by its critical mass. So if you measure the carbon footprint of transporting a shoebox, for example, on board a ship, in a container amongst 23,000 containers on the same ship, the carbon cost of that is obviously much lower of that box alone than transporting it by road, on a truck, etc. So even as the EU is trying to push, and also the Maritime Forum is also supporting, shifting more transport onto waterborne traffic, because obviously that gives us less congestion, less pollution, etc. So if the maritime industry wants to grow in this way and become greener, it wants to do so obviously in a greener way. Why? Not only because of regulation, we've heard about the Green Deal this morning, not only about CSR or ESG, but also because the maritime industry, shipping in particular, is a victim of climate change. So if you have extreme weather conditions, cyclones, if you have heat waves, if you have rising sea temperatures, etc., that is all detrimental to shipping. So it is the industry itself which wants to become greener. We can't kid ourselves. There's no way of doing this without technology, and this is why we're talking today, and that is why we're talking about the twin transitions. So the transition to digital and the transition to be less polluting. Obviously, all in all, there is research going on, and we are very encouraged. I can give some examples here of making the industry more digital, more connected, more autonomous. Even we are even talking about self-driven vessels, as we are talking about self-driven cars, but obviously the risk and the magnitude when you're talking about between ship and road transport is totally different, and that is one of the main challenges in development. But we're very encouraged. We're encouraged because we're seeing a lot of positive signs. This year, until August, we broke the record worldwide of new orders for new ships. So fleet modernization, the change in fleet modernization is increasing. 3 years ago, CMA CGM ordered 9 mega container ships of 23,000 containers each. One of these ships, the Jacques Sade, started sailing to Malta a few months ago. And for that reason, it's LNG powered, by the way. So obviously this is why we are saying we are in favor of obviously fleet modernization. That investment on its own encouraged the Malta Freeport to invest in new cranes, not only so that it can reach out further and obviously accommodate this new ship, but also now because these cranes are more energy efficient and less noise polluting, etc., etc. If we talk about the Freeport, if we're talking closer to home, there's been a lot of digital technology now to reroute and optimize the traffic within the precincts of the Freeport itself, so that what they call the tractors do not run around inefficiently, and they optimize the loading and all the traffic, etc. That's all good even for the environment, even around the Mirza Buja area, for example. It's been quite a long time now, but we've heard about the scrubbers. The scrubbers are the treatment of the exhaust that comes out of the funnel. So it's collected first, treated, and then it goes out. We've all heard about the shore-to-ship power project, which Infrastructure Malta is doing. So when a ship calls into Malta and berths by the quay, it switches off all its energy generating power itself, which can be more polluting, and just plugs into the grid, and there you have clean power. There's a host of other digital technologies. For example, there are platforms nowadays that read important information from ships, so the speed, RPM, etc. Then that data gets sent to a central node. That central node accumulates all the data of all the ships, uses algorithms because there's other information like weather, tide, currents, traffic, and it helps reroute all the ships so that they obviously take the more efficient route. There's new ways of propulsion, for example, whereas we always have known about the propeller and the rudder. Nowadays, they're doing away with the rudder completely and having a 360-degree rotating propeller, which gives you about 20% fuel efficiency. Alternative fuels, we've talked about, obviously we know about low sulfur diesel, which unfortunately is still the most prevalent because it's the most available. Yes. But we're talking about LNG, I've talked about the Jacques Sade. The problem is that ships like the Jacques Sade that are run on LNG cannot refuel in Malta yet. So there are talks ongoing of how to introduce this way of distributing LNG. We're talking about hydrogen, we're talking about ammonia, which are the future, so to speak. So there's a lot to say, but I realize that I'm taking a lot of time.
Thank you very much. In fact, I was going to ask you about obviously the challenges and the ways that we can improve. You've mentioned a lot of them. Now, a very important factor we must all acknowledge is the time. And obviously, the more we can speed up processes whilst doing things correctly, the better for everyone. I'm going to move on to Dana Farrugia. Dana, as the CEO of Tech.mt, I'm going to ask you to share with us your views of how technology and tech-related enterprises can in fact improve green economy.
Good morning, Claire, and good morning to everyone following us this morning. My fellow panelists have mentioned a lot of change that is happening. However, I would like to touch base on something very specific, which is perception. Businesses perceive technology innovation as expensive, and this is a very wrong perception because nowadays, with subscription-based software, costs actually are less than having your own custom-made solutions, or maybe buying a system, a whole system for yourself. We are an SME ourselves, and I can vouch for how much cost-effective subscription-based services are. And with regards to technology companies and the effect of digitization to our environment, in Malta, sometimes we think that we're not there yet. We have done a lot in reality. From 2014 till today, Malta has advanced in environmental sustainability by over 57%, which is the greatest increase out of all member states, for example. There is still a lot that we can do in specific areas, particularly waste management, for example, or pollution management and control, and data sharing. Innovation and technology nurture an environment of collaboration. and data sharing and research sharing. However, an island state like us sometimes might tend to suffer from this collaboration and sharing, and we need to keep nurturing as an EU bloc for data sharing to happen as a union and not as isolated countries, in order for us to be able to monitor patterns even more and identify practices which are more environmentally sustainable. And to conclude, us as Tech.mt, we were established to help the technology sector in Malta to grow. And environmental sustainability, as Kevin said, cannot happen without going digital. Going digital will save us a lot, will optimize a lot in our lives. And so far, in order to break into that perception, we have embarked on a mission to visit companies ourselves, ask them about their processes, and help them identify and optimize out of digitalization.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dana. Moving on to Engineer Daryl Shkembri. First of all, thank you and well done for the work you're doing so far. As an entrepreneur and coming from the private sector, how would you say important is the role of technology in safeguarding our environment?
Yes, of course. Technology really is underpinning a lot of the movement in the green economy. As all the panelists have mentioned, it's a very crucial time in the world right now when you look at what is happening on a global level, but also even on a national level. And technology there plays a key role. As an entrepreneur, of course, it's a very exciting time for us because we see a lot of opportunities to make a difference in a number of different sectors and markets. And as they mentioned before, examples really play, we feel, a massive difference. Sharing success stories from different sectors really allows businesses to understand and realize that at the end of the day, green technologies really don't need to be so difficult to implement, so costly to implement. And fundamentally, it always makes sense from a business point of view. So investing in green technologies is not only good for the environment, but also good for their bottom line. And that means that once we bridge technology, making a business sense from a financial perspective, then it means that the solutions that we can implement, and as an entrepreneur, that is our passion, that's our goal, we see that there is an environment which allows us to be innovative, to take risks in the solutions that we deliver, and make a difference in a number of sectors. So a very exciting time.
Thank you very much. We have a question that arrived through our chat box, and I remind our viewers as well to fill in any questions through the chat box. It's time to do some Q&A. Actually, so this question says, what is the financial burden on companies when transforming their operations to greener technology? Probably you mentioned it a little bit, Dana, but maybe we can elaborate a bit further, even from yourself.
I would say that at the start, it's not that expensive to start off with, because the main approach that we see makes sense is to look at the small, low-hanging fruit, as we call them, to say, listen, can I invest in this subscription-based model, for example, something which doesn't have a high starting off cost, but something which I can manage on a day-to-day point of view, see the benefits, measure the gains that I'm making from a financial perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a CO2 emissions, for example, reducing, and gain confidence from that. Gain confidence in the technology, gain confidence in the provider, gain confidence that as a business owner, I am better off. And once you get to that point, then we see businesses shifting their mindset and saying, okay, now I want more. I want to see how I can reduce paper, how I can be more efficient in the way, for example, my staff move around the place. And then technology there can help in various aspects to get businesses to where they want to be.
Thank you very much. I like what you said about confidence. I really think that this is a matter of trust. It's a matter of confidence. So as individuals as well, we need to see what stops us from actually fear would probably be the very basic emotion that would stop us from taking on more technology. But like you mentioned, all of you, we need to share more stories and empower people to take on technologies more. So thank you very much, all of you, Mr. Karim Kakia, thank you, Dr. Joseph Gerada, Mr. Kevin Borch, Dana Farrugia, and Engineer Daryl Schembri for being with us for our first panel. We'll close off this first topic today by sharing with you a video clip from entrepreneur Mark Kassar of So Limited.
I am Mark Kassar, one of the management team at So Limited. We have been established since 1991. Our core business is contract furniture. However, now we are diversifying our business into new ventures where we will be introducing a range of furniture which will be also for the domestic market through our new brand named Dari. We operate from a 10,000 square meters footprint, mostly allocated to the manufacturing from Honda Army. In the recent years, we have took a couple of initiatives. We have completed several investments through the help of Malt Enterprise and also Measures and Support, the division. Our new factory, which we have launched during 2021, operates partially from PV panels. We have also invested into a northern light system whereas the lighting we get from natural sources. We have also invested into innovative machinery where we actually reduce the waste and reuse all the waste material that we generate. We have recently also invested into a spray robotic line system where through filtering stages we eliminate all hazardous fumes from reaching the environment. Through this investment, our finished material is not exposed to our employees, hence we are also safeguarding their health and safety during their work. So is moving away from the use of the traditional materials which are not environmental friendly and moving more towards a more sustainable material from approved suppliers. So is currently introducing more paperless administration through a new system we are introducing into our business, and we are hoping that by 2022 this process will be complete and we will be helping more towards a greener environment.
Thank you, Mark. So let's move on to our second topic of the day, the need for green environmental planning. And to do the keynote speech, I would like to invite Professor Simon Borch. Professor Simon Borch is Malta's ambassador for climate action and chairs the National Climate Action Board. Simone chairs the steering committee for Malta's national post-COVID strategy. She is not with us today due to being abroad. However, she sent us this pre-recorded presentation, which we would like to share with you.
I am very happy to be with you, even unfortunately only virtually. I am at the climate conference in Glasgow, but at least this way I could also be there with you to share in this important conference that is being organized. And I will be discussing a bit what we aim to do when planning for a just transition for sustainable development and climate action. I think we should start first by defining what is a just transition, in the sense, what do we really mean? Just transition doesn't mean just for the sake, it's only a transition, but it is a transition that is ensuring justice. So what we are saying is that if we are going to put into effect the change in the economic model from what we have today to a decarbonized economic model, then we need to create the level playing field. And we can do this by addressing socioeconomic and environmental costs, risks, and vulnerabilities involved in implementing the transition. It will be the sectors that are most negatively affected that need to be supported most. So the first thing that we need to do is to ensure that we identify which are these sectors and then understand which are the jobs that are mostly at risk, what kind of upskilling and reskilling we need to carry out. The COVID pandemic has definitely brought a lot of hardship on our businesses, on our workers, on our employers. It has affected our way of life and has had tremendous impact on our mental health. Definitely, the COVID pandemic has had also a huge impact on the economic status of the country. However, it has also highlighted the vulnerabilities, how frail our environment is, and therefore there is no consideration to choose between COVID and climate action, but rather to link the two, to put the two in sync with each other. COVID has made us rethink our ideas as to what constitutes the critical infrastructure of our country. For example, looking at how supply chains are thrown into disarray, energy security, food security. It has made us appreciate the linkages between the Sustainable Development Goals, how they constitute, in fact, fundamental requirements for our country. So we need to ensure that to prevent the widening of disparities, we must make sure that recovery is not uneven, but that there is a level playing field. So we will not only rely on new technology to effect decarbonization, but we must also ensure that we have the necessary capacity building requirements in order to secure that we have the right expertise in effecting the transition. And we need to also look out how our long-term growth will lead to resilience and the avoidance of future shocks. How can we do this? By prioritizing and accelerating the shift from carbon-intensive activities through targeted support. Our economic diversification will require that we finance the necessary investments. We nudge the behavioral changes and the way our businesses run their course, in the sense that we need to award those businesses, we need to direct our businesses, our private sector, to take the right options. And one of the ways how government perhaps is considering doing so is to dive into further and have granular stakeholder dialogue. This is essential for a just transition because we need to understand what are the concerns of our private sector, the concerns of our businesses, particularly the micro businesses, and also what are the concerns of our citizens. It is only by going granular in our stakeholder dialogue that we can understand and learn more and more how we can look at facilitating decision-making power and responsibility. This would also create the right kind of trust building that is necessary to generate private investment. To identify and address any structural changes, especially to understand what kind of support we need for capacity building, we must start to build these partnerships amongst ourselves between the public sector, the private sector, and across sectors. We need to also ensure an integrated, place-based approach, which ensures synergy and coherence between investments supported under the Just Transition Plan. The Just Transition needs to be anchored in tailor-made strategies that are effective at the national level. Apart from addressing the source of climate change, which are the fossil fuels, apart therefore from tackling mitigation, we also need to prepare ourselves for adaptation to climate change, how our lives will be affected by climate change, how our businesses would be affected by climate change. And this is a risk. We need to understand, therefore, the risk factors that will emerge as a result of this existential threat. A challenge that we have, for example, is understanding each other, especially trying to avoid working in silos and instilling synergy. If we look at what we have done on the national level, recently we've had the National Climate Conference. A lot of work had been done beforehand to start these cluster groups in different areas. For example, a cluster group on transport, a cluster group on sustainable finance, a cluster group on the building and construction industry. These are the type of granular stakeholder dialogues that we need to start discussing between ourselves how we can improve. And this has been possible because we have also the legislative framework. We have a Climate Action Act that sets up a Climate Action Board, which is made up of government officers, but also the academia, representatives of business, NGOs, and also close discussions with the National Youth Council. What has been our experience so far? I think the biggest thing that we need to focus upon is what I've already referred to, the synergies, the need for forward planning, and hence the kind of topic that we are discussing today. And we need to ensure that the kind of forward planning that we aim to sustain our transition for a decarbonized economy is built on a bottom-up approach. I think it is worth looking a bit at how in the past, whenever there was the need for a transition to a new economic model, not just in Malta, but even abroad, for example, the shift from an economy based on slavery, for example, as you had in the 19th century in the US, in the south of the US. And also, for example, reliance on certain activities that were becoming outdated. The usual arguments were that the existing model offers some form of economic success and wealth, something we are used to. So if we change and others do not, we lose the competitive edge. Change might lead to poverty, joblessness, and dependent sectors will not be able to survive. But we know that history has shown us that one cannot resist change. Adaptation, as Darwin used to say, is the secret of success. And in fact, new economic model arguments show that once there is an alternative, it is not justifiable to persist because others are still doing the same thing. Once something is harmful, we would be advantaged if we are innovative because we are piercing through a new system, a new economic model. And change should be seen as an opportunity to unleash new jobs, new business opportunities, where the dependent sectors can be retrained and restructured. The important thing is to ensure a just transition, that no one is left behind, that everyone is given the chance to improve and to become part of the new economic model. I think it is high time that we change an existing economic model that does not take into consideration the natural capital deficit. It is neither socially nor economically just to continue to keep the status quo. And resources are not infinite, so our businesses will pay the price if we do not make the change. The entire community, and especially the most vulnerable, will be the hardest hit. So economical and social and environmental interest in curbing pollution, having clean transport and greening the environment, minimizing and dealing with waste become more energy efficient and not entirely dependent on fossil fuel energy resources. This is the kind of future that we need, the kind of future that will make our country a leader, that will make our businesses leaders in the wider world. The best human achievements have always seemed like a futile attempt or a utopia in the face of pessimism that things could change. But at the same time, history has shown us that the sense of commitment shown by people that believed in change was often appreciated much later by future generations. Thank you, and I wish you a busy time.
Thank you very much, Professor Borch. Let's move on to the second panel discussion. The topic is the need for green environmental planning. So before we start introducing our panelists, I would once again like to invite you to put in any questions that you may have in the chat box of Zoom, and then we will put them forth to our panelists. I'll invite first Professor Ruben Paul Borch from the Faculty for the Built Environment. He's also president of NGO Sustainable Built Environment Malta, IISBE Malta chapter. Professor Alex Torpiano, Dean of the Faculty for the Built Environment and Executive President of Din l-Art Helwa. Mr. Pierre Vella, Executive Chairperson of Malta Road Safety Council. Dr. Roberta Lepre, still being mic'd, not a problem. I will introduce our entrepreneur Mark Kassar from So Limited to join us here. Thank you very much. And I'll start off with questions towards you until Dr. Lepre joins us on this panel. So this panel is the need for green environmental planning. Let me start with Profs. Borch. Obviously, the construction sector contributes to a huge carbon footprint. It's no news and it's not new information. For example, according to the UK Energy Research Centre, the manufacturing of key constructions material represents 11% of global CO2 emissions each year. And this is set to grow at an astonishing rate. Concrete accounts for 7% of global emission, and yet its use is on the increase. How can we decarbonize construction and our building stock through construction materials?
Well, good morning. The truth is that we have to set the scene. The scene is such that we have a high consumption of natural resources in construction, that we generate large quantities of waste as well. And Malta being an island state, this problem is even more pronounced because of the also negative impact, negative outlook of the sector. I do believe there is a negative perception of construction also because of the way we consume materials, natural resources, and generate waste. Now, why concrete? Can concrete and green coexist? We talk about concrete because, in truth, it is consumed in large quantities. It has a huge impact. It's second only to water in terms of human consumption globally. And the truth is that the trend shows that there is an increasing consumption and production of concrete. There is an increased reliance on the material. And therefore, it is argued that slight contributions in this sector can lead to huge benefits overall in terms of a greener economy because of the sheer large volumes of the material we consume. And therefore, there have been improvements in the way we produce the material, in the way we choose the ingredients, the constituents to produce the material. And this led also to important opportunities for the industry itself. Therefore, the way we exploit waste, or rather byproducts from other industries, because we try to avoid using the term waste, because there is opportunity in these wastes as byproducts, to lead to lower consumption of non-renewable resources. We try to recycle aggregate. We use alternatives to cement because of its high embodied energy and impacts. And it was realized that when we go for this approach, there is also an improvement in the durability performance. And this leads me to an important point, that through the exploitation of these alternative materials, which contribute towards a greener concrete, there is a large improvement in the impacts, therefore reduction in global emissions, but also longer a life cycle approach which encourages an improved durability of structures. Now, this is beneficial because at the end, this leads to lower needs for maintenance, improvement in infrastructure, safer infrastructure, and therefore, at the end, there are benefits. So you gain by reducing waste, you gain by reducing consumption of natural resources, which are non-renewable resources, and at the same time, you have a longer lifetime performance, which improves durability. This leads to lower maintenance costs and also generating new opportunities, because there is the need, therefore, for retrofit of structures, which can lead to new opportunities. There is also the need to measure well these improvements. Measuring is key, because otherwise we can fall in the trap of greenwash sometimes. How do we measure? And there are sustainability assessment tools which help us measure correctly the real impacts, the true impacts. So it's sometimes argued, for example, that the exploitation of timber as a renewable resource leads to benefits. It may be the case, but one needs to put into the equation, for example, the transport distances, the lifetime of the structure, the lifetime of the building. At the end of it all, if we manage the resources well, we get improved quality and also new opportunities for small enterprise, for large industries to exploit new opportunities in recycling, for example, exploiting new resources.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to Professor Torpiano. Here we are talking about the Green Deal, but in parallel to this, I know also that there is what is called the new Bauhaus initiative in Europe, which is presented as a way of making Europe a leader in the design related to energy efficiency, of course, and sustainability. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, how many days do we have to discuss this topic? Well, the Green Deal, as you say, is reality, a European Union blueprint, first of all, to help in the post-COVID recovery of the continent, but with the ambition of making Europe, they say, the first carbon-free continent in the world. And that is okay, as long as Professor Borg has mentioned, we find appropriate ways of measuring this carbon, first of all. The new Bauhaus is a very interesting development which emerged out of this, and I think it's the term Bauhaus refers to a period of architectural design which tried to marry technology and the new means of production with aesthetics. And that was a big breakthrough, because they sort of started to see that machines can be beautiful, for example. Well, that was the 1930s period. The new Bauhaus is, I think, a reminder that by decarbonization, by talking about energy efficiency, by talking about sustainability, we must make sure that we do not lose the other aspect, which is aesthetics and culture. That is what they're really doing. They're saying Europe ought to be a leader in design, which marries sustainability, low carbon, energy efficiency, all those things that I feel sometimes are becoming cliches, with aesthetics and a better way of life, because in the end, that's what we're talking about. Of course, this issue is a bit complicated, because then it relates, I mean, they propose this new Bauhaus approach also as a way of making economies grow. They're saying we become leaders because we show how it can be done, which is fine. In my view, and then I make 2 points, I think we have to be careful about how we measure economic growth. And of course, I'm not going to spend much time talking about the tool that we currently use. MEA has talked about it, but many other entities have talked about it. Is GDP the proper tool? And I'll just give you a little example of the construction industry. If somebody sells a field, that adds to the GDP. If somebody builds on that field with blocks of apartment, that adds to the GDP. If there is a big fire or a flood, and that has to be done, that adds to the GDP. But the only minus that we make to the GDP is perhaps the value of the crop that perhaps used to be produced, and we don't take into account the loss of amenity, the disruption to people's life, and especially the aesthetic impact.
Yes.
Professor Borg was talking about the carbon footprint of things like concrete. We forget that there is a lot of carbon embedded in the buildings that we've already built, because we've used those resources. So by demolishing buildings and throwing them away, we literally waste carbon. So again, I'm saying all this because we have to look at what we're doing in Malta. Yes. What we're doing in Malta, the theme of this panel is green planning, environmental planning, but what are we really talking about? We're talking about making sure that our future is more beautiful, as well as being more efficient. And I would like to end by saying, hold on a minute, okay, let's not focus only on the mathematics of decarbonization and the percentages that we're meant to achieve, et cetera, et cetera. Because the bottom line, and this is something which should worry all people, but especially businesses, the bottom line is that people no longer like Malta. So we've just read in the recent media of foreigners saying, we're leaving Malta because it's no longer as attractive as it was. Yes. We read of young people who want to leave Malta, young Maltese people who want to leave Malta. And that should be a big, big concern. So the idea of the new Bauhaus is let us start thinking in terms of making our places not just energy efficient, which is important, or low carbon, but also beautiful places to live in.
I would like to declare that I would like to be the first person who has a Bauhaus in Malta. Now, whether that's going to be in my lifetime or not,
well, the problem
is
that in Europe, they started off with this concept. We are not yet sure where it's going to lead. And in fact, the first activities are to set up new Bauhaus centers throughout Europe so that we start discussing how this can be done. It's not exactly clear, and there is a risk that it becomes a lot of paroli, paroli, paroli. You know,
but they're beautiful.
But I think the issue is let politicians, let planners, let businessmen be aware that it's not only about low carbon or sustainability. It's about making places better to live in.
Thank you very much, Professor Torpiano. I'll move on to Mr. Vella. First of all, Mr. Vella, I would like to ask you to tell us what the Malta Road Safety Council is.
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. Unlike my previous speakers, we're very much hands-on. The council has been set up in 2015, so relatively quite young. However, our members have given their life where it comes to road safety. And I'm proud to say that within these few years, we've created a synergy which is fruitful and most effectively willing to change the environment that there's out there. I mean, we're talking about a lot of wish lists. We're talking about how we would like to live in our future. But when you talk about road safety, it's something which is living with us. It is something there. It is something which you can touch. And I believe that had it not been to these dedicated people that I have around me, certain things wouldn't function. And I think it's not a case of being professional, but being dedicated, of having a job which is your passion. And that makes a lot of difference in life.
We're talking about EV now with you from a consumer safety aspect. How prepared are we to live with EV?
Well, I'm proud to say I've been driving an EV locally since 2013, covered roughly 80,000 kilometers, and I'm still here. I haven't been electrocuted or shorted or whatever. So this misconception that EVs are dangerous, they have to be treated like any other machine. We have to keep in mind that any type of moving vehicle out there can be a utility, but it can also be something which can cause an injury. When it comes to EVs, there's something very, very basic. In ICE vehicles, there were a lot of concepts which we didn't have to look at. In EV, just don't look what's in the engine. Don't need to bother what's in it. The most important thing is enjoy it. And maybe something to complement my previous speakers, one of the things which I have appreciated driving an EV is the ambient and the atmosphere around me. True. And one of the nicest things, we've been talking about pollution, which at times we don't talk enough, and I think one of the nicest things, even this is something which is debatable, that I enjoy myself being in traffic, and I'm the only person around who's not polluting.
And quiet as well.
Oh yes, that's another thing as well. Well, that can have two sides of the coin. Unfortunately, I do have people who actually crawl up nearly on the bonnet of my car because they don't hear me coming around. So that is something which needs to be addressed as well.
Thank you very much. Before I move to Mark Assar, I'll invite Dr. Roberta Lepre. Dr. Lepre is a corporate sustainable consultant at Weave. Hi, welcome with us. What is the role of businesses in creating an overall greener community planning?
Okay, it's a complex question. Maybe I'll take a step back as well and explain why I'm doing what I am doing, because I truly believe that business has a role to play. So in my career, I spent some time sitting on the Guardian for Future Generations, for those who are familiar with that body. And I realized there how much business is crucial in being the catalyst towards this transition to a sustainable model. So I think the first thing, if we had to look at the role of business, is to understand and acknowledge that business does have a role to play. Very often, we tend to think of this kind of responsibility as the responsibility of government or of the local council, and we try to shift a little bit of that responsibility away from us. But everybody has a role to play, including the small and medium-sized enterprises. And I would like to underscore this because, again, when we talk about corporate sustainability, maybe smaller enterprises think, oh, this is the luxury of the multinationals, of the bigger corporations. But the reality is that the vast majority of enterprises locally and everywhere are small and medium-sized. So together, they have a strong impact if they all work together towards a common goal. Linked with that is also the understanding that the nature of an enterprise is shifting. So traditionally, an enterprise was set up to, let's say, meet the expectations of the shareholders, and that was the primary and sole goal. It is still like that to a certain extent, but we're seeing a shift also through regulatory development. So if we look, for example, at the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which will be coming in soon, there is an expectation on businesses now, including medium-sized businesses, if they are listed, to also address the needs of the wider stakeholders, not just the shareholders. Also the shareholders, so a company still needs to be profitable at the end of the day, but profit is not the sole purpose of a company. A company is now expected to acknowledge the wider stakeholders and to ensure that the impact on those wider stakeholders is not a negative one. So we're looking here at a fundamental shift of the actual essential nature of what an enterprise is. So that's just by way of sort of introduction. In terms of green planning, I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are various guidelines, standards that we can look at. So that's, to a certain extent, the benefit of being late to the party, if you like. So we don't need to come up with our own solutions. There are many guidelines and standards that we can look at, and by following those standards and adapting those standards, very often we would be changing considerably the way we are operating. And another thing that I would like to suggest is that we start with the low-hanging fruit. So sustainability as a concept is very broad, especially if we're looking at it holistically. So there's the environmental side, which is, let's say, the more obvious side. But then there's also the social pillar and the governance pillar. And in order to have proper sustainability, we need to be looking at those three pillars and looking at them as being interconnected. So we cannot do one without the other. So it can be quite overwhelming because we're looking again at substantial changes within the actual function of the company. So we start with the low-hanging fruit. There are various schemes and support measures which are available, and perhaps we can start with those to avoid being overwhelmed and also to be able to make this transition feasible, because we should start with the help that is available. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for your intervention. I'll move on to Mark Kassar. Mark, how has, first of all, well done as well for your practice. How has the industry changed towards reducing the environmental footprint, and how has SO evolved throughout the years?
So basically, there were mainly two changes. One, from the material side. The industry is moving towards a more sustainable material, whereas in the past, furniture was manufactured from solid material. Nowadays, most of the furniture, even if you visit fairs abroad, they exhibit furniture which is made of sustainable material. So mainly the change in material brought also a big change also in the factories. Obviously, factories evolved as well. Mainly the biggest change was the amalgamation of technology with the traditional, as we know, machinery. Today, an investment into the manufacturing of furniture is not like in the past, whereas you will buy separate machinery and you just, each machinery do a function. But today we are moving towards more connected lines where we are also moving away from the being efficient because you are producing hundreds of the same models. Today, through batch one factories, you can still be efficient, but be efficient in a manner that you can still produce a one, that's why it's called the batch one, a one furniture, style, size, etc., etc. So in actual fact, for Malta, which is a small economy, obviously, it is a very important aspect of an investment. So also has been looking at this investment for around 5 years, and now today we can say that it is completed. Now, obviously, there's more challenges that we need to embark, but in the past 5 years, through consultants, not local consultants, but mainly German consultants, we have come up with this concept, whereas we have launched our factory, which is totally connected. An important factor in this investment was not solely the amount of investment, but the return on the investment, because as a business, we see the return on investment, and correctly stated, we are not solely focusing on the profit bottom line return. Because with an investment which incorporates technology, you're also enhancing the quality of the work environment for our workers, which is today a very limiting factor. Also, CSR, which is an important factor which clients are nowadays considering as well. In a nutshell, the moving towards a greener environment helped also to evolve and adapt.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Professor Torpianov. We can keep it a bit short as we're overrunning. It just arrived. As a nation, we will require robust, timely, and detailed statistics and planning. How is the country doing in this?
Yeah.
And who shall be responsible to achieve a balance between construction development and environment preservation?
Yeah, this is even more difficult than the first one.
Loaded, very loaded.
It's very loaded. Well, look, the short answer is I think we have to have a better planning system. In other words, we have to take planning seriously. And by say planning, I do not mean the approval of permits. That is not planning. Planning is having foresight. Planning is taking hard decisions. Planning is also, and this is important for businessmen, deciding on modification of consumption models. Because part of the problem is that we want everything. We are a small country and we want everything. We want a motor track, we want a train, we want everything. And that is a problem because in reality, we cannot have everything.
Yes.
So, and I say it to my Godston friends, even Godzo wants everything. But it's a small country. And in reality, you cannot have everything. And if you have too many of one thing, you're going to kill off something. And this is what I think is happening to Malta, because we say, okay, but the economy needs building, we need construction, fine, so we build more apartments. But now people are leaving because it's no longer attractive. So that balance can only be done by a proper planning system, and we don't have that.
Yes, we need people with foresight and people to be bold.
Planning is foresight. Planning is foresight. Planning is looking ahead and taking hard decisions.
Yes, agreed. Thank you very much. We have an intervention from the floor. Ms. Doris Samud Bonici, Senior Vice President of MEA. I would like to invite you to do your intervention.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. The first what comes to mind, I mean, everybody's been very positive, and thank you all for doing your part in actually making the environment and moving towards the climate change. But we haven't said much about waste management, have we? I mean, it's a horrible subject. When you think about it, everybody wants to push it away and not be seen. And well, let's have a view of what's happening actually in Malta. We're trying very, very hard to get there. And we've done millions of reports. We've promised commitments. We've done a lot. But let's be fair. Our regulatory bodies need to be more on a practical approach, in the sense that if we do desk decisions and not know what's going on down there and the day-to-day problems and solutions we have to face, then regulation is not going to happen, or it will happen very unjustly, as some decisions have been taken already, where you get a fine of 1,200 euros, for example, for putting on the wrong date. And other stop permits have been let to go on with their work. So I am not here to criticize. I just want to open the window for you to see what's actually going on. And what about our waste sorting? I'm talking about an overall appreciation of what's going on. I mean, it is very easy to come up with ideas like putting on these rental apartments, for example. If you put on a list of how the waste work in Malta and what goes in what bag and at what day you should be out, I would put it in the law that it has to be there for everybody to follow when you are talking about rented flats. Also, the sorting is the problem. We have court cases because contractors or systems are in dispute because of the sorting of waste. Why? Because this has to happen at the producer level. This has to happen in the home, in the factory, at the site where the waste is produced, not when the contractor picks it up and disposes of this. And how does our company, I might as well mention it, WasteServe, deal with it? They find the contractor. How are you to know what's in the bin? You are supposed to be picking up recyclable waste, and you end up with a hazardous waste in there for which the contractor is fined. So I am not saying it's an easy task. It's never an easy task. Waste is a very, very complicated subject, and the management of it is even worse. So we must look at on-the-ground solutions rather than do desk decisions. And what about introducing what other countries have introduced, the Fit and Proper Person Act, which enables any contractor who has any job to do with waste to know what they are doing, to know the classification of what they are touching and what they are disposing and where. And the duty of care, which is supposedly part of our law, but how is it enforced? The duty of care goes even deeper when you have beauticians, hairdressers. What about the hazardous substances they use? Do they end up, by law, do they end up where they should? I mean, I'm just throwing examples here. And the local councils and the contract manager, he shouldn't be the one who gets the 5% and goes after the lorry to see that everything is done. He should be an expert like the architect is an expert on the site. They have to go and see and they have to know what's being done. Professor Torpiano mentioned the Bauhaus, and I have been at talks in Europe with the ESC committee, where Europe is making a commitment to eradicate substandard housing. And we're talking here about addressing the problem of energy poverty and also setting standards, how the limit of a room, how big a window should be, how this and that. And this is all being financed throughout Europe. So it is a commitment. There is a start. Here I would appeal to the regulating bodies again to accept innovation. Many a time you get to propose certain projects or even as part of a tender, and you get totally disqualified because you haven't been innovative or introduced something that is more towards our green economy. So I think that with all due respect, everybody has to update, not the user, not the producer, but also the authorities.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your intervention. We actually have another question, this time addressed to you, Pierre. What is the difference between EVs versus hybrid? Obviously, mentioning the UL, petrol, LPG, gas-fueled cars, which is the most environment-friendly, given that batteries of EVs have eventually to be disposed of, and the other version has no such requirement. This is a question that is very common, I think, about people considering EVs.
In my answer, I'd like to reply to just a small comment on what the comments we had regarding waste. We're talking about construction, but I think this goes a step backwards. As a Remote Road Safety Council, we're having a lot of incidents, and when I don't say accidents, I say incidents, of transportation of material going on site, carelessness, not obeying regulations, and these people get away scot-free. And we have, on average, between 25 to 35 complaints that come to our office every single day. So why is the constructor not obeying or abiding to the regulations? So this is what I would talk about waste. A newly surfaced road, and within hours, it's already stained with concrete. And nobody takes any action, nobody knows who the guy is, nothing. So this is something we have to address as well. Coming back to my favorite subject when it comes to EV, it's a case of what you're looking at. When we're looking about EV, we're talking about a totally electric car, a totally powered car. There is also something which I feel we're lacking when it comes to what are we going to do and how we're going to recycle the batteries. My vehicle is approaching that time that it needs to be placed in a museum. So it has to be addressed as well. When it comes to hybrid, it's good to know that in the process, hybrids are going to be identified as mild and normal hybrids. Why? Because when you talk about a hybrid has a very limited mileage when it comes to battery. It's good maybe living within Slima, Valletta, Msida area, and you'll maximize. But if I'm traveling further out, then the batteries will definitely need to be recharged. Then there are two types of hybrid. You have the plug-in hybrid and you have the traditional hybrid. The plug-in hybrids are the ones that you can charge the battery. That, yes, is beneficial, because why? If I'm traveling a short distance and I arrive at my destination, and hopefully I will find a charging pillar, I can actually charge my car and boost up my battery and do away with emissions. So it's a case of addressing cost, because there is also a cost factor one has to appreciate. Having said that, we have to appreciate the grants that are given by the government, and there is an evolution. Within these 6 years, EVs have evolved a lot. This is like the equivalent of when the first mobile phone came in. It used to last 20 minutes, you charge it for 3 hours, and this is the same concept with electric vehicles. There's a lot of innovation going in, and there are a lot of input going in. And funnily enough, there are entities which weren't related to EVs who are investing in that. However, is this a period that we're going through? Is it a case that we'll be moving to green hydrogen? Where are we? One has to analyze costs, your budget, and how you're going to utilize it. Very, very important. Those three factors are paramount in my decision of buying an EV.
But the disposal of batteries is still a question,
yes.
Mark.
Well, abroad, we all know that first and foremost, we have to clarify something. When we talk about the battery of the car, we're not talking about the traditional 12-volt battery. It's like, imagine you have compartments. So when this battery dies down, it can be utilized for a lot of other things. And it doesn't mean that there's going to be a total failure of all the batteries. So this is a concept that abroad is being utilized. And like, for example, I have photovoltaic cells in my house, and instead of wasting them, I store them in this battery compartment. Right, so do I need to have a car in the garage? No, it's nothing of the sort. It's like having an enlarged battery pack that we carry around in our mobile. And this can provide electricity and do away with all the wastage within our house. But it is something which we need to address. It is, I believe, considering what Professor Torpiano was saying, we're restricted for space. This might be something which can help us. But we have to look at holistic aspect. It's not a case, yes, let's move to electric vehicles, that's it. But listen, what's going to happen before, what's going to happen now, and eventually, I wouldn't like my children to be burdened up with batteries all over the place. When it comes to the small batteries, we have a very good setup how these are recycled. Unfortunately, when it comes to EVs, we have to think a little bit long term and be a little bit imaginative, as we said.
Once again, I think we should close off with the word foresight. We need a lot of people with foresight and innovation, true, but also a lot of foresight so we can really plan the present and the future. Where I thank you very much for being here and contributing to this panel, Dr. Lepre, Professor Borch, Professor Torpiano, Pierre Vella, and Mark Cassar. Thank you very much. We move on to sharing with you another clip by entrepreneur David Abela from Eurobridge.
I'm David Abela, up until recently Managing Director of Eurobridge Shipping Services, now Director in charge of Business Development. Eurobridge was set up back in 1995 to cater for the growing shipping industry in Malta, and I have taken over the company in the year 2000. Over the years, we have grown exponentially. Just to mention that over the last 7 years, the company has grown 3 times as much. We have invested heavily in the trailer operation side of the company, and we now own over 42 trailers with a warehousing capacity of over 5,000 square meters. It is the company's policy to continue investing in the warehousing and local logistical sector, besides developing its international groupage sector. Eurobridge is very proud to say that it was probably the first and still only paperless company within the shipping industry. It took a lot of courage to do this and change the policy and attitudes of our employees and team to make it happen. Besides that, we also invested heavily in solar panels, and we have almost 400 solar panels on top of our warehouse. Besides that, we also operate battery-operated forklifters within the same warehouse facility. Eurobridge is looking forward for the industry to become much more viable in the near future, where heavy vehicles such as trucks and tractor units become more viable with regards to electricity consumption and power, so we can be one of the first to invest in them. Furthermore, we are pushing the boundaries as a company to introduce new logistical concepts within the island, and besides making the transport industry much more profitable for the Maltese entrepreneur, it will result also in much less traffic on the roads, reducing thus the carbon footprint of our country. Thus, I'm also encouraging here the government and the local players to come together and find new solutions, to have a good vision about the industry, help each other out to make this happen. This is a small country we live in. We are an insular economy, so we really need the government and the local players to come together and work out a greener vision for our economy to make all this become a reality.
And we move on to our third panel discussion. The title is Towards Enterprises Operating with Greener Energy. And before I introduce the panelists, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Engineer Abigail Kutayar, who is the advisor to the Minister at the Ministry for Energy, Enterprise and Sustainable Development. Engineer Abigail Kutayar is a chartered engineer who over the past 10 years has been involved in multiple high-profile projects worldwide, developing regeneration and sustainable development strategies, as well as assisted clients in multiple sectors to optimize their operations and become more energy efficient. Thank you very much, Engineer, in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all. Today I will be speaking to you, as rightfully introduced, about SMEs, the importance of SMEs, and the green growth, which is normally attributed to SMEs. How we can actually turn environmental challenges into business opportunities. We know for a fact that SMEs within Europe accounts to around 25 million. So the portion of SMEs and their importance is pretty significant. SMEs within Malta, based on the Eurostat also and NSO verifications, account to around 99.8% of the whole enterprises, which is also basically one of the main or major entities around Malta. They also account to around 77.5% of the overall employment, which means that if SMEs actually fail, obviously we're going to have our economy, which would be also failing in this respect. And also they account to around 76.5% of the total value added. And the reason why I'm saying these, or why I'm presenting these statistical figures, is not to be too technical, but rather to give the importance and value of why we should really focus on the small to medium-sized enterprises. Policy and funding. So what policies and funding within the state of the EU are actually applicable? So SMEs are key in shaping enterprises policy in the European Union, and this has also been part of the European Green Deal and the importance of the Green Deal in itself. Also, 54% of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, which has been recently presented also by President von der Leyen herself, is allocated to green economy. So this is the reason why we strongly need to shift the economy to a green economy, to one which is much more appealing in terms of funding and the green infrastructure. And I'm not saying that we should disregard what has already been done, but it's even ever so important to shift our focus, or else the focus of the SMEs in their whole entirety. 15 million of the EU regional funds are dedicated for private investment for local SMEs. So this means that the focus of the EU is also being attributed to private investment in this regard. Here I'm going to be speaking a bit about the EU Green Action Plan, because I believe that it ties very much with the green growth within SMEs. So greening SMEs for more competitiveness and sustainability means that we need to reduce the production costs and increase the productivity plans and gains. Actually, even in my line of work, I meet a lot of SMEs on a day-to-day basis together with my other colleagues, and we harp on this a lot. For an SME to be profitable, it doesn't just need to focus on the productivity levels, but also how it can actually increase those levels while being sustainable and obviously green. Green entrepreneurship for the companies of the future, so how these SMEs can actually be a test bed for the introduction of innovation, research, and the government is also putting a lot of effort in this. We are seeing a lot of enterprises, also smaller ones, which are actually focusing on the effect of research, innovation, and how can they actually bring what has never been tested also in Malta. The opportunities for SMEs to adopt a greener value chain. I mean, everyone knows that the supply chain is a big sore at the moment. It's a sore point. Last year, we used to say, and we said obviously that there was no demand, or the demand actually decreased drastically, but now we have other constraints. We have constraints whereby we have issues with the delivery of the materials, the raw materials, and the whole supply chain. Opting or shifting our vision to a greener value chain can actually enable this transition. Opting for sustainably sourced materials, locally sourced materials, can actually result in better economic growth and also job creation. So opting for jobs and value chains which actually enable this green growth can actually enable also the issues, or part, not all of the issues, part of the issues which we have with the supply chain. Also access to markets for green SMEs, so how we can actually elevate and promote green SME markets. And also, even as part of the ministry, we also work with Malta Enterprise, and I know for a fact that there's a lot of push which is being given to green SMEs. So what is the government doing in all of this respect? We're speaking about what there is in the European front, but what is the local government doing in this respect? As we are all well aware, the recent also budget which has been announced was majorly focused on sustainability and how it can actually enable such green investment. One of the main schemes which there is also existingly, which has been introduced in the past 2 years and which has also been reintroduced this year, is the energy efficiency for SMEs scheme, where there is an allocation of 1 million for energy efficiency support for industry. So basically, we are strongly incentivizing and also sharing the idea with SMEs that what is not being measured can't be accounted for. And for this reason, there is also a free grant for SMEs to actually carry out an energy audit from which they can actually then invest in energy efficiency support measures, such as changing of the equipment, changing of anything which has to do with the improvement of energy efficiency. Environmental, social, and governance credentials, so the opportunity for SMEs to be guided to acquire the ESG credentials. We are very much working hand in hand with the SMEs in order to help them to actually focus on ESG credentials, the environmental, social, and governance. I may dare say that all quoted companies have actually endorsed this proposal, and we're also having small organizations coming to us in order to actually focus on this activity, which is the ESG and the importance of ESG when someone would obviously choose a company to another. The Smart and Sustainability Investment Grant, which has just been launched by the Malta Enterprise. There is also an allocation of 5 million of business leading into equipment and optimization of their operations, and obviously reduction in terms of activities and opting for more sustainable operations. There's also, and I harp on this a lot because I believe that research and innovation should always be key. And I strongly believe that Malta, I already said this, but Malta can actually be a test bed for other organizations outside of Malta to actually come here and focus on the initiation of research and innovative projects. And also we are assisting enterprises in order to acquire this knowledge and obviously fund this kind of activity. Other support mechanisms which the government is also focusing on is renewable energy sector. This year, there's also another launch of 24 million allocated for new feed-in tariffs. This 24 million will not only be focused on SMEs, of course, but renewable energy incentives and schemes in its whole entirety. But this means that SMEs can actually focus on this. And one thing which I wanted to share with you is that a big portion, and when I say a big portion, it's close to 90% of renewable energy installments in Malta are normally carried out on residential rooftops. This means that there's a huge potential for large organizations and also smaller ones. There's a lot to be done over there. And at the moment, we're working with also different stakeholders in order to understand what are the difficulties and challenges to actually surpass this hurdle, so to say. The transportation sector, recently there was earmarked an investment of 3 million euros in charging infrastructure and also allocation of funds for business fleet. We heard, we went to stakeholders, and actually the government heard what the stakeholders were telling us. The existing or the previous investment schemes were more focused for residential or people who would wish to obviously change their vehicle. But we know for a fact that fleets can actually be a key contributor to the reduction in GHG emissions. So we said what was working, what was presented was not working because it was limited to the de minimis scheme. So we decided to actually invest in here as well, and we're going to be proposing a specific grant for larger fleets. Security and alternative sources of supply, we strongly believe that without a security of supply, SMEs obviously cannot operate. So for this reason, there is a huge investment in 170 million allocated for the implementation of a 200 megawatt interconnector, which obviously would enable a more security of supply in order to enable a more secure operations of the actual companies and SMEs, and also innovative technologies where we are currently studying the feasibility of green hydrogen. There are actually SMEs who are approaching us and telling us that they wish to change their fleet, their transportation fleet already to hydrogen. So we are testing this from the supply side. In order to conclude, as a way forward, I believe that SMEs can actually become leaders in energy efficiency implementation, and I believe that this can be done even with the assistance of the government. But apart from the government, the SMEs really need to want to actually carry out this transition. It's not only about the government, it's about the vision of the organization as well. The SMEs need to work towards becoming carbon or climate neutral. It's of great pleasure to me to hear SMEs coming actually to the government telling us, but how can we actually attain climate neutrality within our operations or within how we actually operate or carry out our day-to-day activities, or within how we are carrying out the operations with regards to the employees, remote working, and so on and so forth. Capitalize into funds while the government commits to issue more incentives. This is very important that I think it has to be the target of the SME to capitalize into funds in order to actually enable such investment. Pursue in creating the demand. So, as I was saying just now, we can't expect always the government to spearhead change. If there is no demand, then obviously there's not going to be a supply. So it's important that the stakeholders and the government work hand in hand so that there would actually be the need for this shift. And I can assure you that we are doing this, and these SMEs are coming to us to actually spearhead this shift. The government is also supporting in the upskilling and the reskilling of workers. We are very much focusing also into the shift to certain skills which along the years unfortunately have been lost. So we are also working with Malta Enterprise in order to actually start also focusing on blue-collar jobs and the importance which they actually get into the whole value chain. And also, it's important to commit. We are committing that in the coming months, you're going to be seeing a different side. We're going to commit to action, and we're currently discussing in order to introduce a sustainability mark for organizations so that they would actually be given a value for what they're doing. At the moment, there's no sustainability mark, but we are discussing in deep discussions so that we'll give value to when an SME wishes to actually make this transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Kutaya. Well done. Thank you for your presentation. We move on to a pre-recorded message, which we have from Steve Allul, who is a financial consultant, and then we will introduce our third panel discussion.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on this discussion. I am sorry for not being able to make it physically with you, but I am so happy and so glad that the Motor Employers Association is focusing the agenda of this conference on green growth and the transitioning of our SMEs towards sustainable business models. A topic which is very important because it is indispensable if we really want our economy, our Maltese economy, to move towards decarbonization in the years to come. Indeed, I believe that our businesses can be and will be the leaders of this transitioning process if they take up this opportunity. Undoubtedly, sustainable business models are the business models of the future. Indeed, I would say that those business models which are not looking into investing in sustainability are business models which are de facto running on an expiry date. This is very much similar to the situation we've had, in my opinion, 20 years ago with computerization. Those companies that failed to recognize the fact that computerization was essential for their business model to be able to compete in the future do not exist any longer. And a sustainable business model, a green business model, today is pretty much in that same situation. Our companies need to recognize that, and I think the pandemic has accelerated this process because the pandemic is showing everyone that businesses, particularly SMEs, need to be more agile, need to have very effective digital touch points with their clients, and need to be very, very sensitive to their carbon footprint because the consumer behavior is changing and changing rapidly. We have clients, we have customers, potential customers, which are becoming so sensitive to the carbon footprint of their products, of the products they acquire, of the services they make use of. And regulation and policy is also taking us towards that direction. And we want to help, want to assist our businesses, and want to make it easier for our businesses to take these investment decisions. That's why Malta Enterprise has been very much at the forefront of the sustainability transition of our SMEs. And very recently, Malta Enterprise has rolled out a very important scheme, the Smart and Sustainability Scheme, which is supporting in the capital expenditure of our businesses, particularly of our SMEs, directly through cash grants up to €50,000 for sustainable projects and digital projects. That cash grant can be upped towards €70,000 for those businesses, those startups, goal-setting companies, and also for those companies which can show with an independent carbon footprint report that they have an actual improvement in their carbon footprint in their operations. This is just one scheme. The Malta Development Bank has recently extended the SME Trade Facility, for example, that now explicitly includes sustainable projects as one of the eligible projects for funding, which could go up to €5 million. Malta Enterprise, again, has rolled out very recently soft loans in this regard. I think the government support in terms of supporting our businesses when it comes to capital expenditure is really important. EU funds are also available, and the Resilience Fund is actually one of the greenest, the Maltese Resilience Fund is actually one of the greenest resilient funds that the Commission has approved so far. So I think this shows the commitment of government entities and of public funds in terms of assisting our SMEs into this transition and make it easier for our SMEs, for our board decisions to look into sustainable projects rather than conventional projects. That is, I think, very important. On the other hand, we'll have to appreciate that the benefits of these projects will materialize on a monetary perspective as well, because these projects, sustainable projects, will definitely have a positive impact on lower costs for our companies and lower operating costs. Energy efficiency, for example, is a clear sustainable project which has a direct positive impact on the cost base of our companies and therefore a direct positive impact on the profitability of our companies. That return on investment is very important, and I think an important message that we need to send across today is that going green is neither riskier and it doesn't have a negative bearing on profitability. It's actually the other way around. Not going green is probably very riskier in terms of competitiveness, and going green actually reduces the cost base, the operating cost base of our SMEs. Of course, we're cognizant of the fact that, like any other investment, investing in a transition requires capital expenditure up front, and this is where the government is supporting our SMEs by schemes throughout various entities, which are supporting the capital expenditure side of these decisions. Another aspect which SMEs need to start factoring in their assessment is, in my opinion, the ESG part and the element of reporting, if needs be, or at least of data collection in terms of the SME output and input in terms of carbon impact on their operating models. This is not mandatory for our SMEs, and it's not something which is expected to be mandatory anytime soon. But I think the market will actually be driving this kind of transition. The market will probably be driving this idea that even SMEs would need to start recording their carbon impact in terms of their operations. It could very well be that in the future, in the short term, clients will be actually asking for this carbon impact reporting. And perhaps suppliers, particularly international chains, will be requiring this kind of investment, this kind of reporting. Reason being, basically, because larger companies, not SMEs, but larger companies have a mandatory requirement for ESG criteria, which might dovetail, might trickle down to their suppliers. And even here, the government is supporting our SMEs through an ESG framework, which is presently open for quoted companies, but will definitely be able to be extended to our small and medium-sized companies.
Thank you very much, Steve Alul, who is the first panelist who was supposed to be with us today, but unfortunately, due to commitments of being abroad, he was not able to, but he was our first intervention on our panel discussion towards enterprises operating with greener energy. We will hear more from Marika Tonna from Business First, who will join us as a panel speaker, Mr. Paul Azzopardi, Deputy CEO, Malta Development Bank, and entrepreneur David Abela from Eurobridge, joining me here today for our third panel discussion. Thank you very much. Hope you are all well. Thank you for being with us. I'll start with Marika. Marika, Business First is the one-stop shop for businesses here in Malta. But besides that, you also assist and guide entrepreneurs in incentives and various schemes. Can you mention how employers and business owners can benefit from such schemes? And also, which of these were designed to assist enterprises to be able to transform their business operation to a more sustainable one?
Good morning, first of all, and thanks for the opportunity to come and speak here about the incentives, mainly of Malta Enterprise. Business First is part of Malta Enterprise. One of our most important roles is, in fact, to guide entrepreneurs or startups as to the incentives that are available, not just those of Malta Enterprise, but also of other government entities like Business Enhance and Jobs Plus, and there are many, many incentives. Well, Malta Enterprise alone has over 30 incentives, so I would not go through them all today because we would be dining here. However, there are incentives for the whole business life cycle. So we start with innovative startups. We have a host of incentives to help innovative startups. Then there are incentives for growth, incentives for diversifying. It's across the life cycle. Even we have an incentive for those businesses that have closed down because of COVID and they would like to restart another business. And so we have an incentive called Restart. So it's from beginning to end. There's something for everyone, basically. The only sector which we do not help because we cannot, because of state aid rules, is direct production, agriculture, in other words. But across the spectrum, there are incentives for everyone. There are incentives that are open, like Microinvest, and there are incentives which are targeted at specific industries. To come to the topic of today, we have various incentives that are targeted specifically to reduce the carbon footprint of businesses. Some of them were mentioned by the previous speakers, but to go a bit into detail, we had one specific scheme which was for the construction industry. We heard today how polluting the construction industry is. This was taken up immediately. We had grants to help them to improve or replace their machinery to become greener. And I'm pleased to say that it was taken up, the whole budget was taken up immediately, and it wasn't a small budget, it was 4 million. So there is will by the industry to change. So we've pushed a bit and helped. The industry is ready to change. Then we have another scheme which closes this month. It's targeted at the retail and wholesale industry. Again, this is not a traditional industry that ME, I'm seeing an ex-colleague here, MDC, we're old ex-colleagues because MDC, traditionally we used to help manufacturing, and then IT, and then modern industries. However, this is a specific incentive targeted at retail and wholesale, and the aim is to reduce packaging and the use of single plastics. So it's the aim is to help them invest in equipment, and rather than things are packaged in small batches. You go with your container and fill in the detergent or the cereal or whatever it is you're buying. Obviously, that requires investment, and this scheme is targeted at that. So it is targeted specifically to reduce the use of plastics and the use of packaging. It is a very generous incentive. Again, it's very wide. We're also helping not just with the purchase of equipment, but also investment in IT, in software, and also paying the rent of the extra space that might be needed for a year. So those are two incentives that are targeted at specific industries. Then we have another incentive, which is specific to reducing energy. It is an incentive which we have introduced together with the Electricity and Water Agency, and it is specifically aimed at energy efficiency. And it is a grant of up to 50%, up to 20,000, and then there are tax credits, or it could be a mixture of both. And that was the Eco Retail scheme, that is 50% of 20,000. The energy efficiency scheme is much more generous, in fact, and it covers 30 to 50% of costs. Then we have the scheme which was introduced lately, which the previous speakers have talked about, which is probably aimed more at SMEs, although all businesses are eligible. It is the Smart and Sustainable scheme, where the minimum investment is of just 10,000. So it can be more, but 10,000 is not much. So that's why I said the aim is it is more targeted at SMEs. It covers 50% of the investment. So as Steve said before, it's 50,000, and it could go up to 70,000 if we include tax credits if you are eligible. And then we are working on another scheme which is aimed at distribution and logistics. This has not been launched yet, but it was announced in the budget, whereby we're going to have a scheme to help businesses change from the traditional vehicle to electrical vehicles. However, then there is a generic scheme, which is the re-engineering scheme. This is for consultancy, whereby we give out a grant, 50% up to 5,000 for consultancy, whereby businesses can engage a consultant to come and look at their production process or the way they do things, even if they're in the service industry, and the consultant will tell them how we can do things better. and become more sustainable. Why a consultant? Because when you're doing something every single day, it's very difficult that you see certain improvements which might be obvious to a consultant who would have visited many other places similar to yourselves and would know what the best practice is. We believe that the only constant is changed. After all, it was a Greek philosopher who said this, I don't know how many years ago, so it's not something new. And what's important as well, that even in the other incentives, some incentives which we have, as long as a business is eligible, then they get it, like the microinvest. Other incentives, the businesses have to present a business plan, which is analyzed by our team and then presented to board. And the carbon footprint and the environmental sustainability of these projects are also looked at. So we do not just look at the financial sustainability of a project. Obviously, we operate with government money, and we're very, very careful that when we give out grants and even tax credits, because after all, that is loss of income for government, we're very careful that the project is sustainable, but not only from a financial point of view, especially when we attract FDI. We really make sure that they are not polluting, and not only that, if possible, they contribute towards the greening of our economy.
Thank you very much, Marika. Mr. Paul Azzopardi, I'm going to turn my attention to you. Carrying on from what Marika said, of course, the public funds are not going to be sufficient to tackle climate change by all means, and in fact, they won't meet the massive investment needed. Due to the scale of this investment gap, private investment is of critical importance to support the sustainable recovery. And I would like to ask you, what role does MDB play in crowding in such an investment?
So first of all, MDB is a new bank, so it's been set up 3 years ago. And so it's important a little bit to look at how it's different from a commercial bank, because sometimes people approach us and tell us, you know, I want a loan, or I want to do this. And the Malta Development Bank is very different from a commercial bank. It has, the capital is funded by government. So government gave 60 million as capital. Government also gives the Malta Development Bank bank guarantees so that it can finance other entities, as happened, for example, in the COVID guarantee scheme. And we borrow from international institutions. We have loans, for example, on the ready from the European Investment Bank, KfW of Germany, so that's money which is there. And the way we mobilize, because as you said, the public funding is not going to be enough. The way we do it is by intermediating with the banks. The banks have depositors' money, which is public money, and so therefore by facilitating the loan giving by the banks, we would be moving that private capital. So it's a matter of leveraging. So we give them a guarantee usually, or a blended guarantee, and then blended with grants, because also, as Marika was saying, all those grants, we don't give grants. Sometimes they approach us for grants, and we send them to Marika at the first Business First, or we send them to Malta Enterprise, and they're related. Although Business First is Chamber of SMEs, but it's, you know, it's a sort of thing. So today there are lots of opportunities for these kinds of things. So we don't give grants, we facilitate loans. Sometimes we do give a loan directly, so if it's a big project and we find that it fits into state aid criteria, because we always work within state aid criteria. State aid criteria is set by the EU, so that states don't go giving money to enterprises and compete unfairly. And there's a whole lot of regulations which we have to abide with, including, for example, the length of the loan, how much aid under de minimis or GB. Yeah? So this is the framework where we work. So far we have 4 schemes, and we have 1 big loan that we've done. We produced through the banks so far 560 million. So our guarantees, especially the COVID guarantee, which took 510 million. We incentivize the banks to give, because obviously during the pandemic, when things were so bad, right, no bank is going to give you money unless the money it's giving you is financed, it's guaranteed. And government gave us 350 million guarantee to manage, and we, by leveraging it up, we put it at 777 million. And so that was why working capital money was flowing out of the banks. Now the 4 schemes has 300 million to go. So the banks gave 560 million guaranteed by us, and we can go up to 860 million. That's still firepower. Now we are going to create 2 new schemes. The first one is guarantee scheme to SMEs. We're going to give banks 80% guarantee on the money they give out to SMEs, and it's going to be about 80 million. That puts 80 million into the market. The loans can be up to 1 million and for a period of 10 years, maximum, because it's always the banks which decides. It's another important point with the Malta Development Bank. The bank gives the credit evaluation, so the bank decides whether it's going to give you a moratorium, whether it's going to give you for 10 years, 5 years, the interest rate. Although our involvement, one of the conditions we place on the bank is that they have to lower interest than it would otherwise be, that they would, that if there's no collateral or very little collateral, they should still give the loan. And we also extend the term of the repayment. So those are conditions which we place. Another scheme which we're going to launch, but we're still working on the final details of the state aid where we're going to be able to do it, is the co-lending scheme. So in this case, for example, if somebody needs 5 million, if a project needs 5 million, we can give them 2.5 million direct from MDB, and the bank can give them 2.5 million. You tell me, why doesn't the bank give them all? If the bank wants to give the loan, it's okay. We don't encroach, obviously. However, if the bank says, listen, this is a risky investment. Why? Because it's IP, for example, intellectual property, or if it's a startup, or it's very innovative, or if it's social related or arts, because we want to encourage the arts and the social projects. Okay. So in that case, the bank says, it's too much risk for me. So in that case, we give half the loan, the bank gives half the loan, and we guarantee a big percentage of the loan which the bank gives. So the bank really has very little risk, but still gets the interest, so to them it's okay. And we're trying to get it at around 60% the guarantee we give the bank, but there's a lot of complicated state aid rules which we're working through. Probably it will be up to 2.5 million also, us and the banks, and also that will push 100 million into the market, it's estimated. So those are the new schemes which we're going to provide.
Thank you very much. I move on to David Abela. Well done, first of all, as well for your presentation. We have been hearing a lot about the proposals to improve the transport of people in Malta over the past years. However, not much is said about cargo transport, and this is what I would like to ask you about. Is there anything that can be done both from the public and the private sectors that can make cargo transport more efficient and greener?
Yes, there is. First of all, there are a lot of companies that are taking over some of the schemes that Business First or Malta Enterprise are pushing forward. And one of my company, my Eurobridge, was one of the companies, in fact, that utilize them. However, it is not enough. We need the whole public sector to realize that they need to be much more positive and much more proactive towards what needs to be done for the country to become greener. Just this weekend, the Prime Minister said that transport in Malta is the number 1 polluter in Malta. However, like you said, a lot is being said about passenger transport, but nothing with regards to cargo transport. why? The answer for those who are in the sector is pretty obvious, though the authorities always try to deviate what the real answer is to that question. I will say it here. The answer to that is, unofficially or whatever, is to protect the Burdunara, who unfortunately have had an incredible influence over several governments throughout the years. So much so that the last meaningful change to cargo handling legislation in Malta was back in the mid-90s. That's how long we've been here. I have personally, over the last 3 years, corresponded and met personally with the director, with the general director of the Maltese Customs, to bring the legislation with regards to the release of cargo up to date with EU, in line with other EU states. Yes. The official reply, I have it here on an email, was, you'll open a Pandora's box. That's the official line taken by Customs, the Maltese Customs. Come on. What kind of reply is that? With my proposal, which is nothing new, if you go to other EU states, you will find it everywhere. We'll bring about less traffic, newer vehicles that obviously pollute less, and with it would bring less cost to the Maltese trader. In fact, I can clearly show to anyone interested in my proposal that going greener in this case will mean decreasing costs and more competitiveness. It's a fact. The Maltese trader, I've always said this, the Maltese trader nowadays is not competing with the shop down the road or the other Maltese trader. He's competing with international giants such as Amazon. And the authorities, the local authorities, have an obligation towards the local entrepreneur to help out as much as possible and not hinder it with outdated legislation just to protect a selected few. Okay? The proposal is very simple, like I said, and will follow the European Customs Code legislation. It's all written black on white in there. Is that to let AEOs, authorized economic operators, to operate their own temporary storage facilities and not be forced to unload non-EU cargo at the Halfar bonds, which is an outdated, out-of-the-way, crumbling structure that is only being kept there as only licensed Burdunara can enter the complex to collect third-party cargo. Mind you, I am myself a licensed Burdunara, but I realize that we need to change how we operate in order to reach zero carbon footprint in our industry. Without these changes, we will never reach this target. I don't want to put Burdunara under a bad light because most of them are great people with a fantastic work ethic. But let me show you an invoice received just this week from one of my Burdunaras. Here you go. This is what I'm dealing with every single week. Imagine I have to tell these people to update their method, to become digital, to buy greener vehicles. They just don't know, and they don't have the initiative. They don't need it because their number is limited and they're protected by government legislation, even though the derogation negotiated with EU has elapsed 10 years, but it's still there, unfortunately. So to finish off with my proposal, our sector can start offering proper logistic solutions, such as we see in Europe or other states, that will bring about better efficiency, less traffic, decreased costs, and newer vehicles on the Maltese roads. I just need someone from government to listen to me and be brave enough to bring about these changes. If you don't come together as one, especially here at MAA, the government will have no option but to take up our proposal. At least they will not be able to reply by mentioning something as nonsensical as opening a Pandora's box. Come on. That's it.
David, you're very brave, and I commend you. Thank you very much. We need to stand together more. We need more people who stand with you. And I agree, we need braver people, unfortunately, in governmental positions who actually are brave enough to take these decisions. Sometimes when it comes to decision making, it's very easy to just pass the buck. And we've been having that for many, many years, and it's about time we stop doing so. So thank you very much, David, and well done for that. I do ask for any questions to come through our chat box in Zoom, if there are any from our online. I have one that has just arrived as well, but before I take it, please, I would like to welcome the intervention we have from Joseph Darmanin from MDB as well, and then after that, we'll move on to questions. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Claire. I'd just like to add a couple of comments to the discussion. I think, as we all saw this morning, finally it all boils down to money, to financing. Without money and financing, we cannot invest. If we do not invest, we cannot achieve our targets, we cannot achieve climate neutrality. And this is where the Malta Development Bank comes in. My colleague Paul focused on one of the pillars of the Malta Development Bank, which is the access to finance for SMEs. This is very important because ultimately we need investment by all businesses to achieve our targets. But then there is another pillar which relates to the financing of large infrastructure projects, large projects that have a large impact on the climate. And in this sense, this is another market failure. Now, we call it a market failure. It doesn't mean that someone is failing to do something. It's just a situation that is intrinsic to the banking sector. So basically, when it comes to the financing of large infrastructure projects, as you know, banks are financed by short-term deposits. So it is always going to be a problem to finance large projects with a long gestation period, over a long repayment period. And sometimes, if we want these projects to succeed and to make them financially feasible, we need to be providing a longer gestation period. And in Malta, unfortunately, the level of financial diversification that we have, diversification and intermediation, is quite limited. If I give you an example, just a 20 million project, for example, is already within the limits of most banks when it comes to the single large exposure limit, just a 20 million loan. So the options are limited, and this is what the MDB brings to the table. It brings diversification of solutions, the way it is funded the bank, as Paul said, from international financial institutions and benefiting from AAA-rated multilateral borrowings, which can be used to provide funding over a much longer period, 30, even 40 years, and with much larger amounts. And we've seen this working already. We financed a project recently. The project was in the social dimension, but it involved the construction of a large building. But in this large building, in the construction, they used a patented material, a material that replaces actually concrete. And probably it's more expensive. So you would have a situation that the initial price, the initial investment would be higher. But then you would need a longer repayment period, a longer gestation period to bring about the financial feasibility of the project. So these are the types of financial solutions that we need to be thinking about, especially for large projects in this case, and which the Malta Development Bank is in a position to support, even through syndicated lending with commercial banks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Project. Less concrete was used actually because they introduced spherical plastic domes, spherical plastic balls, and they used less concrete, but it made it stronger because like when you have an arch, so it gets stronger. So that's an example of something which is modern, green, and less expensive and also stronger.
Very good. Thank you. A question I have here from the online participant. Apart from funds directed towards infrastructure, how important is it to invest in skills needed to perform green jobs? I guess that's a question directed.
Yes, I mean, there are a number of incentives to help industry upskill. Also, together with the Ministry of Education, we have an incentive to help directly the employees. So basically, if anyone wants to continue with their studies and they pay for their studies because they go abroad or even they do them here locally, there's a tax credit which is transferred into a grant, really. So we do help both the employers and the employees in the case of upskilling.
Thank you very much. Marika?
SME, the further studies made affordable, which we have increased it. We're going to increase it very soon. We're going to call the banks so that those who are interested can sell it.
Okay.
And we gave a lot of loans to students. And the advantage is that the student wouldn't have to pay anything for the length of the course plus 1 year, so at a maximum 5 years. The interest is subsidized by the managing authority from EU funds. And also, so you've got a moratorium. You can use it for any subject, online, if you're going to abroad, master's, bachelor's, PhD, everything. And that has been very, very successful. We gave nearly 10 million and we're going to increase it further.
Thank you very much.
Well, during COVID, we've encouraged the industry to invest in skills. It was the time for training because maybe production was down. And in fact, there were many, many companies that have taken advantage of the schemes we have to help with upskilling and use that time to train their staff further. So that is a positive aspect that came out of COVID as well.
I thank you all, Marika, Paul, David, thank you so much for your intervention during our third panel discussion. We'll close off this third one by a video clip from entrepreneur Matthew Bedzina of eCabs.
Matthew Bedzina, Chief Executive of eCabs, a company that started with 3 cars back in 2010. At that time, we were purely a product taxi company. Nowadays, we operate with over 1,000 cars on our platform. What started as purely a product company, where we were purely a taxi company, nowadays, we became a product company as well as a technology company. Today, the company employs over 450 people, ranging from technologists, marketers, and also drivers. Back in February 2021, as a company, we decided that we need to kickstart our initiatives when it comes to operating with cleaner vehicles. Primarily, we offered cheaper commission rates to our partner drivers to incentivize them to invest in hybrid or electric vehicles. Also, we committed that by 2025, all the fleet-owned vehicles which are operated under eCabs, will be changed to either EVs or hybrid vehicles. These incentives will hopefully encourage other companies which operate within our industry to follow suit, and also encourage the wider public to start considering the use of cleaner vehicles. At this stage, we are still in the infancy stage of electrifying our vehicles and having an operation which is carbon neutral. Having said that, at this juncture, it is very important that all stakeholders come together, share data and information in order to reach these extremely ambitious targets, both on a local level and also on a European level. The isolated initiatives that are being taken by institutions, both public and even private, should hopefully create synergy that will dovetail into one grand initiative that will hopefully help us achieve an environment which is sustainable for future generations.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I would now like to introduce our fourth panel discussion, Challenges in Moving to Greener Mobility. And to elaborate a little bit on this subject, I would like to invite Dr. Jeanette Aksisa, Director General Foundation for Transport, who was appointed in 2020. Ms. Aksisa was also appointed as project leader of multi-million EU-funded projects and is now a certified enterprise mentor and have since then been active with social enterprises.
Hello and good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address this conference. Let's imagine for a few moments how this seminar would look like in 20 years. We would arrive using a metro from Valletta perhaps in less than 20 minutes. Some of us can have a driverless taxi where one can input the destination once in the taxi itself, receiving a courier from a drone, served coffee by a robot, and perhaps, if we are a VIP, arriving on a high-generation helicopter from perhaps a neighboring Mediterranean country in less than an hour or so. Indeed, green growth is sustainable growth and future growth. Some of us have already experienced some of these innovative technologies while outside Malta. So science is here, and the mix of technologies is with us. The real debate is not whether science works or not, but the speed with which we are adapting to and adopting these new technologies. Have you ever thought how we would like it to be here in Malta and Gozo in the coming years, and how we would like to go there? Imagine how many skills we would need to have, and how many disciplines we need to teach and research, and how different our businesses need to be shaped and run. And the Foundation for Transport is rightly placed with the industry to accelerate the dispersion of tangible knowledge, because we are not talking about whether science is right or wrong, but we are actually studying the impact of these technologies on the operations and the alignment necessary between the vision and plans of businesses and the changes they bring about. And there is no better place to work together hand in hand with all industry players. Green growth in transport requires investment in human capital. Green growth has been widely debated for the last decade or so. It's economic growth and it's also future growth, and we need to work together to make green growth happening. And for this to happen, public and private partners have to join forces to find and implement sustainable development solutions that improve lives and contribute to shared economic prosperity. Green growth spurs a holistic, innovative approach based on knowledge sharing, network building, and leverages technical and multifaceted perspectives to drive smarter future growth and ability to learn from experts across industry. And above all, the opportunity to become part of a global community working towards a more sustainable future through green investments. So the mix of solutions for green growth does not present a one-size-fits-all. Embracing different green technologies can be key in attracting new niches and develop new jobs. While each project and situation varies, green growth principles remain the same. Implementing solutions that integrate multi-sector needs, technological innovation, and social inclusion. For this to happen, transport has to be associated with environment and climate change, sustainability, enterprise, and above all, startups. Green growth in transport not only requires investment in human capital, but also it needs to align it with educational institutions, with new employment policy for the coming 10 years, with the plan for indirect investment, and with the national policies for post-COVID recovery, low-carbon development strategy, and the greening of transport altogether. We must be innovative and up the game to make sure and make better use of the Work-Based Learning Act, an act that has come into force 2 or 3 years ago, and because we sincerely believe it can be one of the necessary tools to integrate multi-sector needs. The maritime sphere, perhaps forming part of a wider context called blue economy, can bring about a lot of change in the creation of new jobs as a result of the new technologies being adopted, but not only. The resultant change in onshore jobs, logistics, maritime aviation, to name but a few, cannot be ignored. Indeed, the blue economy has all the characteristics to be the green economy. In aviation, we can co-create solutions with stakeholders by embarking upon joint pilot projects that can gradually create a network of internships and apprenticeships to guarantee a sustainable flow of employable resources in aviation. We can strengthen the ecosystem by supporting both technical and adaptive capacities by tackling the resultant skills gaps from its widest perspective possible, to include current needs, but also to create future niche. The skill sets tackled can include policy making, both from the commercial and legal sides, compliance, commercial and aviation law, anti-money laundering and taxation, crisis management, technical and semi-technical support services, marketing, and financial management. In land transport, a significant number of employees are industry taught. So transition to a new framework of qualification, certification, and validation has to be gradual and inclusive. Step-in levels of skills and competences can assist the acceleration of new technologies adoption. The national employment strategy needs to be applied to the semi-skilled up to the very, very top technical jobs, with the main improvement areas include digitization, operational literacy, and periodic recertification. This applies to all repairers, including independent ones, spray painters, panel beaters, VRT garages, scrapping, first responders, safety investigators, towing truck operators, damage assessors. The list goes on and on. It's a tall order. And the chain of inclusion must be one to include all. A high level of safety, quality assurance, and qualification are needed. Through the Foundation for Transport, various stakeholders are working together to contribute through knowledge, competence, and expertise to adopt safe and skillful, innovative, and up-to-standard work practices. Access to well-trained, properly equipped, and fully authorized transport stakeholders will increase the take-up of green technologies by both the general public and the commercial sector. Green growth in transport needs the integration of multi-sector needs and therefore a holistic, multidisciplinary platform. This will structure the discussion on strategic decisions in the field of mobility and connectivity. As we all know, changes in these two spheres are accompanied by far-reaching technical, legal, and social challenges. This platform can clarify facts on complex topics and bring together relevant stakeholders, technical expertise, and policymakers. Based on the results from the discussion, recommendations can be made thereon to the policymakers and to businesses in general. The structured approach will enhance visibility of the holistic impact and can visualize the dashboard of all key factors in the greening process of Malta and Gozo, bringing into about a wide range of disciplines in connection with transport can lead to a manageable number of focus groups that can tackle transport and climate change, alternative drive technologies and fuels for sustainable mobility, securing Malta and Gozo as a place for green transport and guaranteeing the necessary training and qualification, connecting mobility with energy and other sectorial needs, standardization, norms, certification, and type approval. We are not reinventing the wheel. Such setups do exist in other countries around the world, and they are necessary to evaluate uncertainties, vulnerabilities, opportunities, and challenges. They can operationalize green growth holistically across multiple sectors, outline green policies and progress that increase national and/or private sector productivity and job creation. They can also provide clear and specific technical concepts and activity planning. And moreover, they can have the potential to conduct small-scale assessments of pilot projects that can become large-scale follow-up projects. The Foundation for Transport is indeed positioned in the heart of the industry and can be an active player in the proposed structure. We believe that adapting to innovation can be really and truly a game changer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aksisa. We come to our last panel discussion. I would like to introduce the panelists. Engineer Longino Dingley, Deputy Director, Automotive Engineering and IET Foundation at MCAST. Matthew Sullivan, Malta Employers Association. Anthony David Gatt from the Malta Enterprise. Paula Bela, President, Malta Chambers for SMEs. Pierre Montebello, Chief Officer Land Transport Directorate Transport Malta. And entrepreneur Matthew Bedzina from eCabs. This is our biggest panel so far, and you have not been given more time. So somehow you have to share 20 minutes between you. How you're going to do that is beyond me. Welcome all. Thank you very much for your interventions today, which I will move on to ask you straight away. So let's start with Engineer Dingley. Can you explain what MCAST is currently offering with regards to electric vehicles and plans for the near future?
First of all, thank you, Claire, and thank you for the invitation. Let me start by giving an overview of the automotive department at MCAST. Presently, we offer 3 programs of studies, 2 at level 3, diploma, and 1 at level 4, advanced diploma. The level 4 is the advanced advanced vehicle maintenance, where the candidate learns how to diagnose. All right? We have a cohort of around more than 100 students presently at MCAST, but this program of studies deals only with ICE engines, that is internal combustion engines.
Okay.
I'm proud to say that last July we launched a level 5 undergraduate diploma course in electric vehicle and hybrids, and which was intended for experienced mechanics, right? And we have a cohort of around 20 students. After 3 months, we still have 20 students. There were no dropouts. Also, regarding facilities, we are in the process of issuing a tender for a brand new electric vehicle for students to learn on it, and we have also acquired 2 second-hand electric vehicles. These are for the students to dismantle, not like the new electric car. Also, I have identified a workshop which is going to be earmarked for electric vehicles only. All right, and we started the research on what equipment to procure, okay, for this workshop. Also, in the future, next scholastic year, okay, the level 5 course in electric vehicles and hybrids will be offered as a full-time course to our students. It will be spread over 1 year. And also, I am going to insert electives into our existing program of studies. Electric vehicles, hybrids, marine, heavy vehicles, etc.
Thank you.
All right. Also, we are collaborating even with the ministry for training of our lecturers, because obviously to deliver a program of studies, our lecturers need to be trained.
Yes.
And lastly, we are also looking into short courses on electric vehicles, because speaking to the industry there, to our students and to seasoned mechanics, we lack short courses. For example, how to replace a battery of an electric vehicle, because we all know that when someone gets an electric vehicle in 7 or 8 years' time, probably he has to change the battery. Right now, it's not worth it, because to change the battery, it will cost you more. But in 3 or 4 years' time, that will change. And we need to have people ready to do that job, basically.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We are addressing challenges in moving to greener mobility. So by speaking to all of you, you will all give us your part. I'm moving to Matthew Sullivan. A lot is being discussed on e-mobility regarding land transport, cleaner cars, electric cars, etc. Of course, we know that MEA membership covers all forms of transport, but due to your specific involvement in the marine sector, could you please, Matthew, give us an insight on what is happening vis-à-vis sea transport?
Okay. So before we spoke a bit about this, but obviously sea transport, first of all, we could be split on an international level and on a local level. Internationally, the good news is that a lot is actually happening, okay? So there are two drivers. One is the industry itself is recognizing the need to become greener. And this is, if you want, pushing forward a lot of initiatives which are happening at an international level. So we've seen, for example, the IMO introducing the 2020 low sulfur targets, which were met. We've got other targets now which are being set by the industry itself. And the other good news is also that, maybe because it's such a huge industry and it's such a big impact, that a lot of planning is being done. So there's a lot of foresight, there's a lot of planning in this area. So there are milestones in the industry. So that is, on an international scale, it's a good news. Obviously, how is this going to impact us locally then? So locally, we have obviously our local operators and also the private yachts which we have in Malta. And also we have to operate, we have to service the vessels which are coming into Malta. Okay? So one of the challenges which we will have locally is supporting these new initiatives, the new investments, these new propulsion schemes. For example, we spoke about low sulfur fuels, we spoke about LNG, and we need to have facilities locally which support these. Kevin spoke about, for example, the cranes. The cranes itself, bigger ships is one of the ways that shipping is addressing the green movement. So we need to have in Malta a lot of investment and heavy investment this time on the ports and facilities, okay, which in part are happening. So the private operators are doing these investments. We have Freeport, for example, who have invested heavily in new cranes, but there has to be more. I mean, we still don't have, for example, a bunkering facility for LNG vessels, for example. It's being planned, but it's not an easy one. There's a lot of investment, in fact, in that respect. Then we also have the local operators and the local private yachts. Now, if you look at the local private yacht industry, that is very similar to the car industry, in fact, because, I mean, obviously everybody has their own boat. There is technology coming in, perhaps not as fast as the car, but there are technologies coming in to look at battery propulsion for private yachts, okay? Superchargers as well, which are go hand in hand. With yachts, you need a faster charging system, and they're coming in as well. So the technology is there, not as much as cars, but there is there. And then we have the local operators. So we have the ferry systems, we have the tugboats, we have the pilot boats, the vessels that operate within our ports. And again, there is talk, okay, again, perhaps not as fast as cars, but there's talk about making those greener, making them more efficient, etc. But again, the main, what we continue saying is that in this industry, the main targets are always going to be the investment, level of investment, which is typically very high in this type of business because you're speaking about long-term plans. I mean, a car has a useful economic life of about 5, 6, 7 years. A vessel has an economic life of 20 years. So you need to plan way in advance, okay? When you build a car, it normally has a lead time of a month until your new car arrives. In shipping, we speak about 3 years before your ship arrives. So there are longer processes which need to be factored in. And this makes investment difficult, and we obviously need more help from the government to support that.
Thank you, Matthew. Anthony, I'm moving on to you. How does the Malta enterprise help energy efficient and green projects and change two-way vehicles, especially now with the new grants coming in?
So I wouldn't want to repeat all that my colleagues said, both Marika and Steve and also Abigail, who gave a good run-through of all the incentives that we have as Malta enterprise. But basically, I think we should focus today on the why and the how. Why should businesses really consider sustainability and green investments? And how we as a government and as an ecosystem can help them in reality. So it's great for me to see the focus that we are now having as a business conversation on sustainability. Maybe it might be because of the COP, it might be because of many things, but finally, it looks like we have a moment of realization that this is not a subject that can be a standalone and you have sectorial discussions on environment and sustainability. This is what we should be discussing. This is exactly the topic that we need to discuss. And when I say why companies should be interested, because there's something in it for them. And that's the way that we should present it. First of all, there can be a why and in it for them when it comes to their own profitability. So it shouldn't be decoupled. Profitability can be part and should be part and will be part of sustainable growth. And at the same time, their contribution to the world. Yes, I mean, we see these major conferences and we say, look, how can I contribute? And how can I start from my little experience, my own world around me? And there are methods and there are ways how we can assist these businesses. From the ground up, for example, the first thing that Joe Gerardo mentioned, shifting from paper to paperless. It's very important to start appealing to businesses. I've seen also the paperwork that was presented by the board NARA and why and how we should get those cohorts excited about sustainability. Let's start from paper, but obviously there's much more. Looking at energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is a very important entry point. How one can change their white goods, their energy performance when it comes to the technology that they have, their equipment that they have. As Minister Dalli, for example, as Malta Enterprise reports into her portfolio, and we do a number of press conferences, we make it a point to showcase how each investment, the sustainability angle, and this is something that we need to continue to promote so that one is inspired by others around them. And then green growth, how you can develop your product to appeal to a new market for you to not only energy efficiency, but also green growth in itself. Apart from that, the green growth in itself, one can also look then at getting the innovation that is being spearheaded by startups and assimilating that in one's company. So even if you don't have innovation within the company, that innovation can be brought on. And my point is this, at each stage of these developments, Malta Enterprise, through Business First, which is our one-stop shop, can be there to help them for energy audits in collaboration with the Water and the Energy Agency, with business plans for green growth through consultancy assistance schemes. When it comes to changing of assets from white goods, their fridge where you have the stuff that you sell, to actual electric vehicles. We are there every step of the way. So instead of remembering all the different incentives and the caps of them, speak to Business First, go to Imria Health, they are available there, and we can guide you. As a business, we can guide you from the paper to the car. My final point is this. It's not about electricity only. It's not about electric mobility only. It's also about other elements, like hydrogen, for example. like autonomous mobility, that can be coupled in the future. And my point is this there. Let's not shy away from technology and from pilot projects, for example. I'm pushed away, I'm put off when I see a level of reticence from jumping on and being involved in pilot projects and instead saying, okay, this is not profitable for us, we will not deal with it. And then we have the stamp of sustainability somewhere in the ethos of that company or that government entity. And pilot projects should not only be there from a marketing point of view to showcase how avant-garde you are, but because potentially in 3 years' time there will be a new directive that will have you do those changes, and before you could have been there, analyzed how those changes would affect you, and effectively contributed. So let's not stay away, and let's jump on the bandwagon, which is sustainability.
Thank you very much. I move on to Paul Abela. As President of the Malta Chamber of SMEs, what do you think would help in moving forward to a greener mobility? And of course, what are the challenges that the SMEs face?
First of all, thank you very much for having me over here. Congratulations to MEA for this splendid conference. As Chamber of SMEs, sometimes we're talking about cars mainly, but then there is the goods. For one to understand, at the Freeport, and David was quoting, there is 200 full containers coming out every day, every morning. So we have 200 full containers going out, spreading goods all over the island, Malta and Gozo. And our idea was, even we gave this idea to the government, that there should be a consolidated transport to our shops and retail all around Malta. Our thinking was to have a logistic place, to have all the goods over there, and then deliveries, because every shop, every morning or during the day, they receive about 6 or 7 vans of Coca-Cola, of this one, of the other one. You know, why don't they have everything in one place? And even when you import outside Malta, in Europe, you have a logistics hub. You have the container, it goes there, you have the goods there, even stored there, over there, and then the delivery will be done with one single electric van to different parts of the island. And that is one thing which one, think that there is already an application. I am a director of Malta Enterprise, one of the heads I have, and there is an application already there. Somebody is thinking about it. There is a company which I cannot name because of confidentiality, but what they are waiting now, they're waiting for in this to allocate space, because they need a lot of space. Okay. They were asking for about 15,000 square meters, and I think this will be something which we can start now. So if they will, they've done the research, it works, because I've been saying this for a long time, and it can be done. So obviously now we've seen COP26, everybody is proposing and this and that, but I think in Malta we have to start implementing things now. And this is one thing that, with this idea and with some in this, we'll find the space for this company, it can be achieved. And I think after all we have to do it all together, like we did in the pandemic. I am the chairman of Business First. We have talked about Business First. Business First gave an example to everyone, one-stop shop. We've handled, Marika, our CEO, we've handled thousands of wage supplements. They were handled mainly by Business First, and obviously Malta Enterprise as well.
Thank you very much. I move on to Pierre Montebello. What strategy has Transport Malta adopted in the field of electrification of vehicles and cleaner alternatives to ICE? And also, what assistance, if there is any, is it providing to increase the number of electric vehicles in Malta?
First of all, thank you very much for the invite and for the opportunity given to us to discuss this subject, which is very important and at heart. Speaking of incentives, first of all, rightly so, the first thing that comes to mind to a lot of people when discussing Transport Malta and greener forms of transport are the grants provided to the general public and also businesses. Yes, during these past years, we've administered and managed these funds which are allocated to the Ministry of Finance. In fact, if you go back a few years, in 2018, the total budget allocated for greener transport was around 1.3 million. Nowadays, we've moved quite a lot. And in fact, for this year, we have seen a budget of 4.6 million. And there was a further injection of 2.5 million euros because of the uptake, which we're very happy with, taken up by the industry and also by various individuals. When it comes to the individual grants, we were speaking of 7,000 euros initially given to individuals or businesses, and then there are the de minimis rules, so on and so forth. I can describe that later on. But now that has gone up to 12,000 euros, and there are further incentives to individuals living in Gozo when they are scrapping their older vehicles. But then you would say our strategy focused solely on grants? Definitely not. During these past years, we've been working a lot when it comes to, for example, car sharing and carpooling. Carpooling, I was seeing an advert a few days ago of one of the operators where it said that they covered more than 1.8 million kilometers with the benefit of having a reduction of 450 tons of CO2 from our atmosphere. So that's quite good. Apart from that, we've worked quite a lot in the area of what we used to refer to as the public service garages. I've met you here who would definitely know as much as I do, where we have streamlined the process as much as possible and made it much more efficient for new operators to come into the field. And there are various other incentives. I cannot leave out e-kick scooters, which for us, although it's a point of contention for most, it's another mode or method by which one can go from point A to point B. It's ideal, as we see it, as what we call the last mile transport. As I said, it brings about a lot of controversy, but I think gone are the days where the only means to go from point A to B was to utilize your own vehicle. There are a lot of measures. I mentioned PSG, chauffeur-driven. There are a lot of services going on. I cannot leave out, obviously, the free public transport. We started initially with free public transport for the 18-year-olds, which is the age usually one starts driving and thinking of buying a car. Eventually, we moved that to encompass all students and even 21-year-olds. Eventually, it was opened up to 70-year-olds plus and all disabled. And all this, I think there's a catchment of around 133,000 of the population, which is quite a lot, I must say. Eventually, as we have heard during the last budget, free public transport will be offered to all from October of next year. Speaking of industry, I cannot leave out one last thing because I don't think we have the time. We're also incentivizing the retrofitting of older vehicles. So when it comes to, for example, retrofitting Euro 3 or Euro 5 heavy vehicles, we're also putting in incentives for that. Apart from the fact, we're also incentivizing the use of PV panels, for example, on buses and on top of coaches. I don't think we have more time. We can discuss this for the whole day, but unfortunately, there's no time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Matthew, lastly, of course, we've heard your presentation, but if there's anything that you can add as to how eCabs is reducing its carbon footprint, and also what are your challenges to change from ICE vehicles to EVs?
Indeed, as Pierre rightly mentioned, last year, since the reform of the PSG license, eCabs became also a platform operator as much as being a fleet operator. And one of the initiatives which we took during the beginning of this year, partner drivers who on board on the eCabs platform with EV vehicles or hybrid vehicles, they pay a commission rate which is less than when they are driving ICE vehicles. This initiative will help partner drivers to invest in vehicles that are cleaner. From a fleet perspective, because ECABS is also a fleet operator, last February committed that by 2025 we'll be shifting all our ICE vehicles to EV vehicles or hybrid vehicles. Currently we have 3 vehicles which are fully EVs, and we're using this period as a pilot study in order to be able to collate data and also share data so that we'll be able to take the right decisions when it comes to investments and charging infrastructure with all the stakeholders involved. Mentioning stakeholders, I think one of the biggest challenges at this stage is the charging infrastructure. Whereas whilst there are a lot of grants in order for companies and private individuals to invest in EVs, ultimately there is a deficit when it comes to charging infrastructure. And also, tied to this is the fact that when it comes to grants, we have to make a distinction between private use and fleet use. And at this stage, when it comes to both charging infrastructure and also grants given to purchase vehicles, a clear demarcation should be made between the usage of fleets, the cars to be used for fleets, because they are vehicles which are being used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, compared to private usage, which, based on global statistics, 95% of the time, the car is always lying idle. To conclude, I think a lot is being done by different stakeholders operating within the mobility industry. The risk is having initiatives being taken in isolation. Yes. And in order to avoid having situations where even our initiative becomes a greenwashing exercise, it is imperative that at this juncture, at this moment, all the stakeholders cooperate together, understand that there are certain, short-term pains, stop seeing things from a myopic, short-term view in order to be able to take decisions which will benefit the generations of the future.
Thank you very much. You concluded very well. In fact, I take on that and say that really and truly collaboration between all stakeholders and governmental bodies is the way that targets set in the Green Deal can actually be achieved and reached. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you. We conclude this part. However, we'll stop for a short break of 10 minutes and we'll be back because we have the last part of today's SME National Forum Conference. Stay with us.